Chapter 330. Jeaner, do you think he will come? The lady who was drawing her eyebrows in front of the bronze mirror seemed to be talking to herself. Young Miss is so beautiful, he will definitely come. A young maid who was about 15 or 16 years old stood beside her and immediately said. Looking at the lady in front of her, even she could not help but show a trace of envy on her face. If she could maintain her youthful appearance like Miss 20 years later, how great would that be? Beautiful. The lady in the bronze mirror had picturesque eyebrows and a dignified appearance. She looked to be in her 20s, but there was a trace of crow's feet at the corner of her eyes that could not be erased. How could there not be some traces left after 20 years? Even if she was a budding young girl, she should have long become a married woman in people's mouths now. He rejected me once 20 years ago. Is he going to reject me again today? The lady looked at the sky outside the window with a trace of pain in her eyes and murmured. The young girl did not know what to say at that moment. She whispered, "Miss, the food is getting cold. Do you want me to heat it up?" When the young girl walked to the table, there was a knock on the door. The lady suddenly stood up and looked outside through the gauze curtain. "Come in." She suppressed the excitement in her heart and said with a trembling voice. Li Yi still could not think of anyone else he knew in the capital apart from Her Royal Highness. Moreover, it was a woman who would give him a handkerchief. Of course, it was not from Her Royal Highness. If it was her, Li Yi would definitely run away with Rui in the night. There would be no need to miss old Madame's birthday. Anyone who dared to accept Her Royal Highness's handkerchief as a token of love must be tired of living. There was a table in the middle of the room with a few dishes on it. Opposite the curtain, there were two indistinct figures. The curtain was lifted and a young girl about 15 or 16 years old walked out quickly. Before Li Yi could open his mouth to ask, another voice came from inside. "You're finally willing to see me." This time, Li Yi heard it clearly. The voice was indeed trembling. At the same time, he was sure that the manservant had found the wrong person. The voice was unfamiliar, and more importantly, the sentence contained all sorts of complicated emotions. It was definitely not directed at him. Li Yi placed the handkerchief on the table. Just as he was about to leave, the woman let out a long sigh and said, 20 years ago, you returned the handkerchief I gave you. Now, you want to return it a second time. Since you don't want to see me, why did you come? 20 years ago. Li Yi shook his head. 20 years ago, he was still in his mother's womb. Miss, you've got the wrong person. Li Yi sighed. He wondered which heartless fellow had actually made a girl wait for 20 years. What could he not say clearly? Why did he have to delay the girl's youth? Why did this routine sound so familiar? You're not him. The curtain was suddenly lifted and Li Yi saw an unfamiliar woman walk out. She seemed to want to say something, but after 2 steps, she looked up at him and suddenly froze. "Auntie, what's wrong?" When Li Yi opened his mouth again, he couldn't say the word miss anymore. Just now, the other person said that she had waited for a person for 20 years. 20 years ago, when she had her first awakening of love, she was at least 14 or 15 years old. Now, she was probably about the same age as his aunt. Naturally, he couldn't call her Miss anymore. However, the other person seemed to have a technique to retain her youth. She looked like she was in her 20s even though she was in her 30s. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to tell. "Miss?" The woman looked at Li Yi and bitterly laughed. "So you've already forgotten about me?" Li Yi felt that he was more wrong than Do Yi. Could it be that this auntie was myopic? She couldn't even recognize her lover. Or could it be that not only did he have a common face, but he also looked especially old? If she wasn't myopic, then she must be a fool. Such a beautiful woman was actually a fool. The heavens were really cruel. Li Yi sighed and turned to walk out the door. Don't go, I beg you, don't go, don't leave me alone again. Suddenly, a sorrowful cry came from behind. Then, Lee found himself being hugged from behind. He was startled and was about to let go of her hands when he heard her choking voice saying, Ming-Han, don't go, I'm willing to be your concubine. I'll go beg my father and brother. If they don't agree, I'll threaten them with death. They will definitely agree. Don't leave me behind again, Ming-Han. Li Yi's expression changed dramatically. It was as if he had been struck by lightning. You said it when we were young. You said that when I grew up, you would marry me. I've waited for so long. 10 years. I've finally grown up, but why didn't you keep your words? Do you know that after you left, I was so afraid that you would never come back. Every month, I went to beg Bodhisattva, you've finally come back. My brother and the others didn't tell me, but I really want to see you again. The Qin family's daughter can't be a concubine. It doesn't matter, I'll go beg them. They will agree, they will definitely agree, the woman's voice choked with sobs. In a short period of time, Li Yi felt his back become wet. He opened his mouth, wanting to speak, but it was as if something was stuck in his throat. He couldn't say a single word. After a long time, Li Yi let out a long sigh. He moved her hand away and turned around. He lowered his head, not daring to look at her eyes. He said in a low voice, You've got the wrong person. I'm not Li Ming-Han. How could I not recognize you? The woman didn't even have time to wipe her tears. When she raised her head to look at Li Yi, her body suddenly trembled. She immediately took a few steps back and her face turned pale. You're not him. Who are you? She had a look of disbelief on her face. She mumbled, Why, my name is Li Yi. Li Yi said in a low voice, Li Ming-Han is my father. Yes. The woman was silent for a long time. The way she looked at Li Yi became incomparably complicated. The two of them looked so similar. Even in her excitement, she didn't recognize him. It wasn't surprising that her subordinates had mistaken him. Her eyes regained their clarity. She placed the handkerchief on the table in Li Yi's hand and said, Help me give this handkerchief to your father. Tell him that I'll be waiting for him here tomorrow night at the same time. Li Yi shook his head and said, I'm afraid I can't help you with this matter. The woman raised her head to look at him and said, Don't worry. I won't fight with your mother. I just want to see him again. That's not the reason why I can't help you. Li Yi was silent for a moment. He said with difficulty, Because he has been dead for more than 10 years. The expression on the woman's face froze. In that instant, her face turned as white as a sheet of paper. What did you say? Her voice trembled even more. Li Yi lowered his head and said nothing. The woman's body became unsteady. She took a few steps back and leaned against the table to prevent herself from falling. No, how could it be, Ming-Han, how could he? She kept shaking her head and mumbling to herself. Her face turned even paler. She bit her lips tightly and a trickle of blood flowed down the corner of her mouth. Li Yi watched this scene in a daze. He did not know what to do. He had only taken one step when the woman screamed, Leave. I don't want to see you again. You liar. How could Ming-Han die? Ming-Han can't be dead. How sinful. Li Yi's heart sank as he looked at the woman who had gone mad. Li Yi did not know how he walked back to the Li family. He ignored the servants' greetings. The little fatty wanted to disturb him but was locked outside the door. After knocking on the door for a long time, he could only leave helplessly. What's wrong with you? Rui jumped off the wall. He looked at Li Yi, who was standing in the courtyard with a dazed expression. He had not moved at all for 2 hours. He walked over and asked. Damn it. Li Yi gripped the embroidered handkerchief in his hand tightly and said in an extremely annoyed tone. What did you say? Lu Rui suddenly raised his head and stared at him in an unfriendly manner. Chapter 331. I was abandoned on the day of my wedding. I've waited for 20 years, and now I'm still willing to be that bastard's concubine. Lu Rui asked angrily. Li Yi nodded helplessly. He even betrayed such an infatuated woman. Who is that bastard, and where is he now? Second Miss Lu's eyes were wide open and her eyebrows were vertical. One of her hands was already on the hilt of her sword. She looked like she was going to draw her sword in anger in the next moment and take the life of that fickle lover and heartless man. If she was born in the future, she would definitely be the most radical fighter for women's rights. He's dead. That bastard has been dead for more than 10 years. Li Yi looked at her and said slowly, come to think of it, you should call that bastard uncle. Why? Lu Rui turned around and looked at him. Because he's my father. Mississippi Lu clenched her fists tightly, and a frustrated expression appeared on her pretty face. She finally understood how Li Yi felt just now. After a long time, she exhaled and said angrily, Mother ****. Lu Rui. Li Yi turned around and looked at her. You said something vulgar just now. If you can say it, why can't I? Mississippi Lu said nonchalantly. But you're a woman. So what if I'm a woman? Do you look down on women? A woman who says vulgar words can't get married. You have to get married. I don't want to support you for the rest of your life. Mississippi Lu's chest was heaving up and down, and her eyes were squinting. Even her breathing was getting faster. After a while, her breathing became steady, and she cracked her knuckles. She said calmly, I suddenly remembered that I haven't tested your martial arts cultivation for a long time. A gust of wind and rain, the grass in the courtyard was very soft, and because it was cleaned every day, it was unusually clean. It was quite comfortable to lie on, but the ground was a little cold, and a little painful. Li Yi rubbed his chest and buttocks. These were the two areas that Lu Rui had focused on. From the looks of it, she had indeed neglected her martial arts training. In the past, she could last a few more seconds without using her hands. After venting her anger, Second Miss Lu flew over the wall. Li Yi lay on the grass and looked at the moon. He took out the handkerchief from his pocket. When he thought about the look in the woman's eyes when he left, he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. As the legitimate daughter of a duke, she was willing to be a concubine so that she could be with the person she loved. She had persevered for 20 years and suffered indifference and criticism, but in the end, all she got was the news that the other party was no longer in this world. For someone who was infatuated with love, after experiencing such a thing, they would probably go crazy. If she could not get over the shock of this matter, the tragic ending was almost certain. She shook her head helplessly, and thought to herself, damn it, what kind of sin did I commit? The capital was indeed too complicated. I'd better go back to Qing and prefecture. Xiaohuan, Rui, wait for me. She didn't sleep well that night. She woke up early in the morning with dark circles under her eyes. She washed her face with cold water in a daze and woke up. As usual, she had to greet the old mistress in the morning. Rui had passed before her, and now she was enjoying the treatment of a young mistress in the Li mansion. Even Li Yi couldn't compare to her. When you go out, take some money from the accountant's office. All these years, the Li family owes the He family a lot. The old mistress sighed and said when Li Yi was about to leave. Li Yi paused and smiled. Thank you, grandmother, but there's no need. I have enough money here. When he left, Rui brought him a lot of money. Everything in the Li family was used, and there wasn't much to spend outside. Li Yi didn't lack money. I'll have someone send the money to you. This is what the Li family owes them. The old mistress shook her head and said with a complicated expression, "It's reasonable for you to do this. The capital isn't a good place for them. It's better for them to leave as soon as possible. The money is enough for them to live without worrying about food and clothing." Her son, who was supposed to inherit the Leaf family and decide the rise and fall of the Leaf family, refused the marriage with the House of Duke and eloped with an ordinary woman. This caused the family to lose face. The old mistress also had resentment in her heart. However, 20 years had passed and both of them had passed away. The old mistress didn't want to talk about the past anymore. Li Yi didn't want to trouble the Leaf family with this matter. He bowed his head and left. In the backyard, Li Ming's wife, Madame Fong, looked at him with dissatisfaction and asked, "Do you know that he took all the He family members away?" Li Mingzhe was tidying up his official robes. When he heard this, he said, "This is what he should do. If it wasn't for the He family, the Leaf family wouldn't be like this. They owe us, we don't owe them anything. The old mistress wants to take 1,000 silver from the accountant's office to give them. What right do they have?" Madame Fong said angrily. "You don't need to care about this matter anymore." Li Mingzhe tidied up his official robes, glanced at Madame Fong, and strode out. Looking at his departing figure, Madame Fong's eyes flashed with resentment. She muttered, "I don't care. If I don't care, your position as the head of the family will be taken by someone else. Leaving the Leaf family is one thing, but why did you come back? Li Minghan is short-sighted and unscrupulous. His son isn't any better. He will only cause the Leaf family to decline even earlier. I'm doing this for the Leaf family, for you." Madame Fong looked out the door and said coldly, "The old mistress has become muddle-headed. There's still me. I definitely won't let the Leaf family be destroyed by an outsider." "Is the third young lady inside?" In the Qin family, a middle-aged man asked the servant girl at the door. "Yes, the third young lady is inside," the 15 or 16-year-old girl said with a trembling voice, as if she was about to cry. "What are you afraid of?" Chen Chong glanced suspiciously at the servant girl, then pushed open the door and walked in. Behind the curtain, an exquisite woman sat by the bed. A smile appeared on Chen Chong's face as he said, "Miao Yu, the plum blossoms on Mount Han are just in time. Let the servant girls accompany you to take a look. Don't you like worshipping Bodhisattva the most? While you're at it, you can also go to the Cold Mountain Temple to take a look. Worshipping Bodhisattva, even if it's worshipping Bodhisattva, what's the use? It's all fake, it's all fake." The woman's voice was hoarse as she muttered. "If you don't want to worship, then don't. Today's weather is very good, so it's not bad to take a look at the plum blossoms." There were not many taboos between siblings. When Chen Chong lifted the curtain and gazed in, his expression suddenly changed. It had only been half a day, but the woman's waterfall-like black hair was already grizzled and her face haggard, as if she had instantly aged 10-some years. "Miao Yu, what's wrong? How did it become like this?" Chen Chong was shocked. Quickly walking over, he grabbed her arm and asked. "Dead, dead, he's dead." The woman's eyes were lifeless as she muttered to herself. "Who's dead?" Chen Chong immediately asked. Ming Han, Ming Han's dead." "How could Ming Han die?" "She still hasn't married me." Seeing the haggard appearance of his little sister, who had once been doted on by everyone, Chen Chong's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Striding out, he grabbed the arm of the young woman outside the door and coldly said, "Speak, just what happened?" The young woman shuddered and knelt on the ground with a thud. "The Li family, my Qin family and you, will not rest until one of us is dead." After a moment, an incomparably cold voice rang out, seeming to come from the underworld. All the servants of the Qin clan in the courtyard couldn't help but shiver. Chapter 332. This damned weather, it's so cold. Li Yi walked out of the courtyard with his arms crossed. It was a sunny day yesterday, but it started to drizzle in the morning. The temperature dropped instantly. He was only wearing a thin shirt, and the cold wind wrapped in the drizzle hit his body. He felt a little cold. Old Mistress said yesterday that the rain was coming. It might rain in the next few days. She asked him to wear more clothes. If he didn't listen to the elders, he would suffer. He should listen to the elders in the future. Li Yi couldn't help but admire the wisdom of the ancient people. They separated the 24 solar terms and created the most primitive meteorology. They could accurately predict the change of seasons and climate. On the rain day, it would rain when it was said to rain. However, it was reasonable to say that after this sunny day, the weather would gradually get warmer. It was a chilly spring. A cold wind blew again. Li Yi tightened his clothes and decisively gave up on the plan to go out. Everything was fine in the courtyard of the inn. Hai Dukchen seemed to have settled down for the past 2 days. They didn't cause trouble for them anymore. The guards of the Crown Prince's residence were bored to death. They were eager to catch a few ignorant thieves to relieve their boredom. This directly caused the people in the inn to take a detour when they passed by the courtyard. Just yesterday, Li Yi had also met his only uncle. He was a middle-aged man who looked very sturdy. He was even sturdier than old Fang. He usually worked outside to support the family. The only reason the remaining women and children of the He family had been able to survive for so many years was because of this pillar of support. His uncle was also married in the early years. Later, they divorced for some reason. It was probably related to the pressure of the Qin family. In this way, his mother's people were all gathered. The capital was a place of trouble. They should hide as far away as possible. Although Qing and Prefecture was not as big as the capital, it was still one of the top 3 prefectures in the Jing Kingdom. Most importantly, it was filled with his own people. They could do whatever they wanted. 1 against 3. The little fatty threw 2 hard cards in his hand. 1 against 5. Li Yi took the opportunity to slip 2 cards. King Bomb. Mississippi Lu's disharmonious voice sounded. Another king bomb. Li Yi looked at Lu Rui suspiciously. Could it be that she had used the shadowless hands to cheat? No matter how lucky she was, it was too suspicious for her to win every round of Fight the Landlord. Li Yi dispelled his suspicions when he recalled that he had dealt the cards in the previous 2 rounds. He gestured for her to continue. She was using a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. She threw the bomb down so quickly. Let's see how she's going to win. Little girl, you're just a rookie who just learned how to play landlord. You're still too inexperienced. Straight. Mississippi Lu threw out all the cards in her hand and took 2 pieces of silver from Li Yi and the little fatty. Li Yi was stunned while little fatty had a bitter look on his face. He had brought mahjong and poker with him, but he couldn't play more than 2 rounds before he was beaten to death by these newbies. Li Yi decided to go out and cool down. The rain outside was actually not heavy. At best, it could only be regarded as a drizzle. The whole world was shrouded in a thin layer of mist. The distant mountains were hazy, and the houses became a group of shadows. It looked quite artistic. Originally, he just wanted to wander on the street with an umbrella to relieve the depression of losing a few taels of silver to Mississippi Lu. Before he knew it, he had wandered to the front of a familiar mansion. Young master, you're here to look for His Royal Highness, right? I'll bring you in now. The gatekeeper of Li Xian's estate had learned his lesson this time. When he saw a familiar figure in the distance, he immediately jogged over with a smile on his face. He was like a completely different person compared to his previous arrogant self. He didn't plan to look for Li Xian, but since he was already here and had nothing to do, he might as well go in and see how his research was progressing. Young master, please wait here for a moment. I'll go inform His Royal Highness immediately. After bringing Li Yi to a spacious hall, the gatekeeper immediately retreated. Li Yi stood at the door and admired the rain outside. There was a plum tree in the corner of the front yard. The petals had been scattered by the wind. Li Yi walked out and saw the petals all over the ground. He couldn't help but feel pity. If these petals were collected, they would be good ingredients for making perfume. Plum-scented perfume could only be made in this season. It was a pity that he was far away in the capital and didn't have time to make these things. Otherwise, he would definitely make a fortune after a while. After a moment of regret, Li Yi turned around and walked back. A few figures walked out from the corridor on the left. Li Yi subconsciously raised his head to look, and when he saw the figures walking towards him, he stopped in his tracks. Damn it! He scolded in his heart. Wasn't it better to stay at home and play landlord? Why did she come out to wander around? Why did she have to come to the Crown Prince's residence? If she came, then so be it. Why did she have to come out to see plum blossoms? She wasn't Lin Dayu. Why did she feel pity for a pile of petals? She can't see me, she can't see me. Li Yi calmed himself down and silently recited this incantation in his heart. He slowly walked forward as if nothing had happened. When one foot crossed the threshold, a voice came from behind him. Stop. Li Yi turned around and looked at the beautiful woman walking towards him. He asked with a puzzled expression, "Young lady, are you talking to me?" When he said this, his voice changed. Before the beautiful woman could speak, a young girl beside her glanced at Li Yi and said in a bad mood, "Is there anyone else here besides you?" Li Yi stared at the young girl. His meaning was obvious. "Bah, you are the one who is not human." The young girl was very smart and immediately understood Li Yi's meaning. A trace of anger appeared on her pretty face as she rebuked him. Ignoring the arrogant young girl, Li Yi bowed to the beautiful woman politely and asked, "May I know why this young lady asked me to stop? I haven't seen you for a long time and you have improved. I wonder how much you have learned in the art of changing your appearance and voice." The woman crossed her arms and a trace of a smile appeared on her lips as she looked at Li Yi with interest. Li Yi smiled awkwardly. What is this young lady talking about? This one does not understand. The woman looked at him with a smile that was not a smile. Her meaning was also very clear. Pretend, continue pretending. Royal sister, you know her? The young girl asked in surprise. Li Yi sighed in his heart. Since he was so unlucky to meet her in the Crown Prince's residence, there was no point in continuing to pretend. He bowed deeply. Greetings, Princess Yonghua. And me. The young girl glared at Li Yi. Greetings. Cursing the broken rules of the royal family in his heart, Li Yi scratched his head and looked at her and asked, "What kind of princess are you?" The old madam said that it would rain these 2 days, but she did not say to look at the almanac before going out. Li Yi felt that today's almanac must have written, "Good to play cards, avoid going out, avoid meeting friends." Why didn't the princess stay in the palace? Why did she wander around the Crown Prince's residence like him? What if she encountered an assassin? Of course, which blind assassin would dare to make her a target? It was purely because they were tired of living. A group of assassins would not be able to withstand a few slashes from her. What a coincidence today. Li Xian walked over from the front and gave Li Yi an innocent look. Of all times, he had to bump into Mingsu when she was about to leave. Even if he wanted to hide it, he could only blame himself. Mingsu glanced at Li Xian with a rather unfriendly look. Li Xian knew that she was blaming him for hiding it. He smiled awkwardly and said, "It wasn't easy for us to get together. Mingsu and Shaning will leave later. I just had someone make a yuanyang pot. Why don't we eat hot pot today?" "No, if we return to the palace late, Imperial Mother will blame us." The young girl shook her head repeatedly. Then she seemed to recall something and looked at Li Xian and asked, "What is hot pot?" Chapter 333. The Crown Prince's residence actually had green vegetables to eat in the middle of winter. Although they were shriveled and not very fresh, they were many times better than the vegetables that were stored in the cellar. It was really good to be born in the royal family. In such weather, fresh vegetables were more precious than gold. There were 4 people around the hot pot. It was a familiar scene. When he was in Qing and Prefecture, 2 members of the royal family often came here to freeload. This time, they could finally freeload. The little princess refused to say anything about returning to the palace earlier. She carefully blew on the meat roll that had just been scooped out. After dipping it in the unique ingredients, she put it into her mouth unhurriedly with a satisfied expression on her face. "Why did you come to the capital?" Mingsu looked at him and asked. "I have something to do. I will leave in a few days." Li Yi put some cooked vegetables in his bowl with serving chopsticks and answered casually. Li Xian had already asked this question once. It was quite complicated to explain. He was too lazy to explain it to her. It was more important to finish the meal and go home earlier. Mingsu said again, "Tianfa has been used in the army. We will know how powerful it is in a few days." Li Yi had no interest in heaven's punishment at all. She felt a little depressed in her heart. She was a princess of a country. What was the point of paying attention to these things all day long? Moreover, she had already seen the power of that thing. There was no doubt that in this era of cold weapons, whichever country the Jing state used gunpowder to deal with, that country would be out of luck. What is Tianfa? Li Yi was not interested. Someone else was interested. Li Xian pricked up his ears and asked with a gossipy face. "You will know in a few days." Li Yi scooped out the last piece of cooked meat roll from the pot, which made the little girl opposite him look at him angrily. The matter of Tianfa couldn't be kept a secret. Half a month later, the Jing kingdom would win a great victory, and the army would return to the capital. Then, everyone would know about this peerless weapon that they had used to besiege the enemy. "Once Tianfa makes a great contribution, my father will definitely reward you heavily." Mingsu continued. "What?" Li Yi stopped what he was doing. He looked up at her and asked, "Why are you rewarding me?" Then he realized something. He pointed at her angrily and said, "You didn't keep your promise." "Not me." Mingsu shook her head and said, "I only found out about it later, but Imperial Father never sent anyone to find you. You should know how much he values you." Li Yi's mood immediately fell to the bottom of the valley. He had thought that the old emperor, who was so busy every day, would have long forgotten who he was. However, with something like gunpowder, no matter how stupid or muddle-headed he was, he would not pretend that he did not know. It seemed that he couldn't underestimate the highest authority in this country. God knew if there were any special agents or spies around him. He had to be careful in the future. The most depressing thing was that he couldn't figure out what he was thinking at all. Even if he were the emperor, he wouldn't be able to do such a thing. Even if he were the emperor, he wouldn't be able to do so. If he couldn't figure it out, he would just stop thinking about it. He would deal with it when it came. What he needed to do now was to fill his stomach. Imperial Father won't reward him. The little girl snorted coldly. Obviously, she was still brooding over the fact that she didn't snatch Li Yi's meat. What exactly is Tianfa? Li Xian looked at the 2 of them in confusion. He felt as if his heart was being scratched by hundreds of claws. "Don't ask so much." Li Yi glanced at him and said, "You will know when it's time to know." Seeing that both Li Yi and Mingsu remained silent on this matter, Li Xian nodded as if he understood. He really didn't ask any more questions. The knife skills of the chef in the Crown Prince's residence were obviously miles apart from Rui. The meat roll was not so thin and needed to be cooked for a long time in the pot. Just as Li Yi and the little girl were fighting for the meat, in a spacious hall in the Li family, the old mistress frowned. She looked at Li Mingze, who had just returned from court, and said, "Is the Qin family really going to kill us? The impeachment is a small matter. It's all groundless rumors. There's no need to worry." However, the impeachers are all close relatives of the Qin family. They must have been instructed by the public house, Li Mingze said thoughtfully. All these years, although the Qin family and the Li family have been in constant conflict, they have never brought this matter to the table. Why? Li Mingze was only halfway through his sentence when he was interrupted by Madame Fong. What else could it be? 20 years ago, we made the Qin family lose face. 2 days ago, we beat up the Qin family's young master and protected the He family. If it was anyone else, they would not let it go. Madame Fong said angrily, "At that time, I told you not to interfere with the He family's matters. You didn't listen. Now, the Qin family has started to make a move. How are we going to fight them?" The old mistress did not say a word. Although Madame Fong's words were harsh, it was also the crux of the problem. Li Mingze's face did not show any signs of nervousness. Which official had not experienced impeachment before? The Qin family's little tricks did not affect him much. At that moment, he thought of something and said, "The third lady of the Qin family seems to have contracted a serious illness." After the court session, the emperor specially sent the royal doctor over. Could it be because of this? What a sin. The old mistress's mind flashed with the image of a young girl with a bright smile. She let out a long sigh and walked out with the help of her walking stick. A heart disease needs medicine to cure it. Third Mrs. Heart disease is not something that can be cured by medicine. I can only write a prescription for her to calm her mind. Lord Qin, you must remember to not let third Miss suffer any more agitation. Imperial physician Lu Jimin walked out of the room and cupped his fists towards the middle-aged man who was waiting outside the door. In that case, I thank Imperial physician Lu. Chen Qing cupped his hands and thanked him. Official Chen is too polite. After sending off Imperial physician Lu, Chen Qing stood in front of his sister's room. Thinking of her haggard appearance, he sighed and did not push the door open to enter. "Big brother, what did Imperial physician Lu say?" Chen Chong walked over and asked with concern. Chen Qing shook his head. Chen Chong clenched his fists and gritted his teeth, that Li Minghan died too early. If he was still alive, I would definitely let him have a taste of living a life worse than death. Chen Qing knew that he doted on his third sister since young. He looked at him and said, "The impeachment of Li Mingze was all arranged by you, right?" Chen Chong did not answer. Chen Qing sighed and said, "As the dignified left assistant minister of the Ministry of Appointments, a few impeachments did not have much effect. In the imperial court, there are many people who are on good terms with the Li family. What you want to do is not so easy. Are you going to let third sister's death be avenged?" Chen Chong's eyes were bloodshot as he gritted his teeth and said. Chapter 334. Look at the bigger picture. After a moment of silence, Chen Qing slowly said, "Today, His Majesty has decreed that Qin Yu will be transferred to Zhangzhou. He will take up his post immediately. This is a blow to our Qin clan. It seems like His Majesty is not happy with us. You are the future head of the family. I don't mind if you look at the bigger picture," Chen Chong coldly said, "but the Li family ruined little sister's life. Seeing her like this, don't you feel bad? His Majesty's health is not well, and the position of Crown Prince has not been decided yet. The situation in the court is unstable, and we cannot make enemies everywhere. The Li family's matter involves many people. Prince Ning is staying in the capital as the supervising inspector and has an ambiguous relationship with the Li family. Now is not a good time to make a move," Chen Qing said in a low voice. "Are we just going to watch our little sister suffer like this? I can't take this lying down." Chen Chong gritted his teeth and said, then turned to leave. Chen Qing looked into the distance and clenched his fists. After a moment, he slowly relaxed them. "Take good care of the young miss," he ordered the servant girl at the door and left with a desolate back view. "Oh, the Arabic numerals and the new method of counting that you taught me are gradually being implemented in the Imperial College. When the time is right, it can be implemented to the whole country. In the future, anything that requires counting will be much easier and more convenient." Her Royal Highness was always thinking for the whole world. She never forgot to talk about national affairs during meals. After making such a great contribution to the country, is there no small reward? Li Yi looked at her and asked, "What reward do you want?" Mingsu thought for a moment and said, "How about I ask father to make you a professor in the Imperial College and specialize in teaching mathematics?" "Forget it. Aren't you biting the hand that feeds you?" Li Yi immediately decided not to reward him for being a teacher to a bunch of pedantic scholars. The little girl who was scooping up the mutton from the pot looked up at Li Yi and asked, "What? That strange thing, it was you who made it." Li Yi thought to himself that the current emperor really did not pay much attention to the education of the princes. What did he mean by, "made it"? The little girl glared at him fiercely and said discontentedly, "So it's you. What kind of lousy number is this? I just didn't write it out. Sir even hit my hand. It's all your fault. Do you still want to eat this piece of meat?" Li Yi didn't even look at her as he scooped up the last piece of mutton from the pot and asked, "Eat." The little girl suddenly forgot about the slap on the hand and reached out to grab it without any regard for etiquette. This bad guy always snatched meat from her. If it was in the palace, she would definitely ask her father to beat him. However, in the palace, she always ate with her mother. During the meal, she was not allowed to speak. Even the position where she held the chopsticks was very particular. If she made any noise while eating, she would be scolded by her mother. In comparison, she still preferred this place. Furthermore, the food in the palace wasn't as delicious as the one here. Imperial Sister had just said that this delicious, hot pot was made by this rascal. Based on this matter, she would forgive his rudeness. Elder brother Xian said that this bad guy's cooking was very delicious. When he returned to the palace, he would ask his imperial father to send people to capture him and make him cook for him every day. He would make him fight for meat with him. As this image appeared in her mind, the little girl couldn't help but laugh out loud. Li Yi looked at the little princess with pity. He felt that she wasn't very favored in the palace. She was so happy to eat a piece of meat. So there were also different ranks of princesses. Poor child, she must be the lowest rank. After a satisfying meal at the crown prince's residence, the little princess was escorted back by the palace guards. Li Yi strolled on the streets to digest his food while the princess walked beside him. Since the matter of Tian Fa couldn't be hidden, our original agreement is now invalid. Li Yi said as he walked. No, I didn't say anything. Mingsu straightforwardly refused. You're acting shamelessly. Li Yi turned to look at her. We originally agreed that Tian Fa was discovered by Xunliang first. The agreement was also built on this premise. Now that the matter has been exposed, the agreement naturally doesn't hold. I only promised you that I wouldn't tell my imperial father about this matter. Mingsu said lightly. I did this and didn't violate the original agreement, so the agreement is still valid. She wouldn't lie about this matter. Li Yi thought about it carefully. What she said seemed to be the truth. At that time, he didn't consider that the emperor would find out through other means. But why did he still feel so uncomfortable in his heart? If he had known that he couldn't hide it, he wouldn't have made the agreement. This was a big loss. Be careful. As he lowered his head gloomily, he suddenly felt a strong force on his arm and his whole body was pulled to the side. A carriage whizzed past him, raising a trail of smoke and dust. The pedestrians on the road all dodged. When the carriage passed, they couldn't help but curse. Li Yi also wanted to curse. A few days ago in Qing and Prefecture, he was almost hit by a guy riding a horse on the street. When he came to the capital, he almost had an intimate contact with a carriage. Damn it, he lived for 20 years in his previous life. How lucky was he to not be hit by a car? Even the streets of Qing and Prefecture didn't allow horses to ride, let alone carriages that fast. Moreover, this was the capital. Li Yi felt that it was better to not be distracted when walking in the future. He turned to ask Mingsu, "Are all the carriages in the capital so fast?" "That's the envoy from the Qi kingdom," Mingsu said with a frown as she looked at the direction where the carriage was going. "No wonder," Li Yi murmured. Regardless of ancient times or modern times, the strongest fist was the last word. In today's situation, the Qi kingdom was the only superpower and had the strongest military force. The Jing kingdom was still being bullied by them. It was normal for them to be a little arrogant. They had the capital to do so. However, this was too damn arrogant. This was the capital of the Jing kingdom, and the envoy from a foreign kingdom was even more arrogant than the nobles in the capital. It seemed that the people of the Qi kingdom were extremely confident. With heaven's punishment, this time, we must make the Qi kingdom pay the price. Mingsu clenched her fists and gritted her teeth. It seemed that she had been unhappy with these fellows for a long time. As a princess of a kingdom, she could only watch as foreigners swaggered around in her own land. How aggrieved must she be? These people wouldn't be arrogant for long. In today's world, if gunpowder was used well, it was no different from a nuclear weapon. Once heaven's punishment was used, the warhorses would be useless and the cavalry of the other party would be useless. It was said that the cavalry of the Qi kingdom was the bravest. No one dared to resist their iron hooves. If the cavalry was useless, their combat power would be reduced by at least half. With a few clay pots thrown out, harvesting people was no more difficult than harvesting straws. Chapter 335. As a princess of a country, especially a leftover princess, what she should worry about the most was not marriage, but whether she would be sent to another country for a peace marriage or whether she would be betrothed to some idiot from a minister's family. As a woman, her martial arts skills were unreasonably high, and she hated evil as if it was her enemy. She was full of national pride, wholeheartedly devoted to the country and the people, and always wanted to exploit others. No wonder she didn't get married even though she was so old. If all the princes of the Jing kingdom could be half as good as she was, after the death of the old emperor, the Jing kingdom would have no problem to maintain its power for decades. If nothing unexpected happened, after the war with the Qi kingdom, the Jing kingdom's deterrence among all the countries would increase by more than one level. Moreover, divine punishment was just the beginning. Gunpowder could not only be used as bombs, but also guns and cannons. In the future, they would be antiques, but in the present, they were definitely great inventions at the forefront of science and technology. According to the law of historical development, with the appearance of black gunpowder, these things should be born soon. Last time, he suffered a big loss. This time, Li Yi didn't want to be the first bird to stand out. Anyway, divine punishment was enough for them to play with for many years. After saying goodbye to Mingsu, he walked back to the Li family alone. At the door, he saw his second aunt, Madame Fong, and two maids getting into a carriage. Before Li Yi greeted her, she snorted coldly. As usual, she didn't even want to pretend to be kind. Li Yi didn't care. It was not the first time he met his second aunt, who was difficult to get along with. He could understand her resentment and dissatisfaction. After all, he was the eldest grandson of the Li family, the only child of the eldest branch. In the big families where the second and third branches were powerful, this was a principle that must be adhered to. Today, there were many unfamiliar faces in the Li family. Madame Fong's 60th birthday was a very important day. In addition to close relatives and friends, those distant relatives who were only acquainted with each other would also come to celebrate Madame Fong's birthday. This was because the lifespan of most people was relatively short at this time. Living to the age of 60 was already a huge gain. For special birthday celebrations like the 60th and 70th birthdays, the rich families would hold a grand celebration. Everyone in the residence was busy, as if it was the new year. In this way, Li Yi seemed especially idle. Apart from copying scriptures and going to Li Xian's place to watch him fly a kite when he was tired, he would also give a few constructive suggestions. Most of his time was spent playing landlord with Mississippi Lu. Of course, it was impossible for two people to play, so the little fatty, who was equally bored, was forced to join in. Lu Rui found all the luck she had lost in mahjong here. She lost a pile of snacks to the little fatty. Half of the silver that Li Yi had brought from Qing and Prefecture was already in her pocket. Mississippi Lu was never tired of a business that only made profits. Every time Li Yi lost badly and wanted to end the game, she would suddenly have the thought of testing his kung fu, so the game could continue. As for the little fatty, it was even simpler. After Lu Rui taught him a few simple moves, the little fatty didn't care about his snacks anymore. He even took out his treasured things. It was just that after he tested the power of those moves, the parents of the younger generation in the residence came to find him. The next day, he could only lie on the ground while playing mahjong. "Big brother, what do you think I should prepare for Grandma's birthday?" the little fatty said while lying on the soft mattress and rubbing his butt. The little fatty had been hanging around Li Yi recently and was used to letting him make decisions for him. Li Yi arranged the tiles in his hand and said, "As long as you don't want to give her your treasured candied plums and pastries, anything is fine." "Why?" Having his thoughts read, the little fatty raised his head and stared at Li Yi with widened eyes. "My mother said that the gift has to be unique." With the little fatty's reminder, Li Yi remembered that as the eldest grandson, he also had to prepare a gift for old grandma. He couldn't afford something too expensive, but something too cheap showed no sincerity. He had to think about it carefully. While Li Yi was thinking about this, Lu Rui made a vague gesture with one hand. The little fatty understood and secretly passed a tile over. In the morning, Li Yi couldn't even afford a cheap gift. He borrowed a few dozen taels of silver from Mississippi Lu and wrote a promise that he would return double the amount when he returned. Only then did his wallet become a little fuller. The little fatty followed him like a bug. He promised the little fatty to fly on the kite for a while when he went to Li Xian's residence this time. A fine horse galloped towards them from behind, and Li Yi hurriedly pulled the little fatty along to avoid it. They watched as the armored knight galloped past them, quickly disappearing from their line of sight, leaving behind a messy street and the curses of the passers-by. The next time they met, he needed to remind the princess that it was time to discipline this kind of reckless galloping in the city. "Out of the way, out of the way." In a place where Li Yi couldn't see, the knight shouted in a hoarse voice, looking as if he hadn't slept for a few days and nights as he galloped straight for the palace gates. At this time, in the throne room, the morning court assembly that usually ended a long time ago had been delayed by more than 2 hours. The current emperor sat on the dragon throne with a gloomy expression. The court was noisy as the civil and military officials were arguing over something. "Your Majesty, I accuse the envoy of the Qi kingdom of being presumptuous and reckless. He had recklessly galloped his horse in the city and injured several people. I sincerely ask for your Majesty to punish him according to the law." A young official stepped forward with a ceremonial tablet in his hand. The noise in the court stopped for a moment. Everyone looked at the young imperial censor as if they were looking at an idiot. He was a young man after all. Although this was what imperial censors did, there was still a time and place to do it. Was he talking about the envoy of the Qi kingdom who had recklessly galloped his horse? No one paid attention to the young imperial censor. An old man stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, I think that ceding a city to the people at the borders can save us from suffering and reduce the casualties of our soldiers." "I second the motion. I second the motion." As soon as the old man finished speaking, several more people stepped forward to express their support. *T. Every inch of the Jing Kingdom's land was won by the blood and sweat of our soldiers. If the Qi Kingdom wants it, we'll fight them with real swords and spears. What's there to be afraid of? *T envoy. They should be dragged out and beheaded. Do they really think that the Jing Kingdom is a pushover? Your Majesty, give this old official 100,000 elite soldiers. We'll definitely wipe out the Qi Kingdom. Emperor Jing rubbed the area between his brows as he watched the court hall turn into a wet market. A first-rank official was cursing like a shrew. When he looked down at the envoy of the Qi Kingdom, his expression became even more gloomy. Chapter 336. The civil and military officials argued endlessly. The envoy of the Qi Kingdom had an arrogant look on his face. In terms of national power, the Qi Kingdom was a well-deserved hegemon. Although the Li royal family had once prospered and created a flourishing age, that was a matter of the previous dynasty. As an envoy of the Qi Kingdom, he could stand tall in any country. "I have something to say." At this moment, another person stood up. The voices of the people arguing became slightly weaker. This was because the person who stood up was the new capital governor, Dong Wenyun. He was favored by the emperor. His words played a decisive role in the current situation. "What do you think, Dong Wenyun?" Emperor Jing raised his eyebrows and asked. Dong Wenyun said solemnly, "Every inch of land in the Jing Kingdom must be fought for. The ancestral teachings left by the great ancestors cannot be changed." Dong Wenyun only said one sentence and retreated to the side. However, he had directly expressed his position. In the court, many people frowned. Dong Wenyun was born a poor scholar and did not belong to any faction in the court. Now that he had shown his attitude, he stood opposite to the peace faction. An old man with white hair and beard said seriously, "The Qi Kingdom has a strong military force. If the stalemate continues, it will be disadvantageous to the Jing Kingdom. Now that the national treasury is declining, it is difficult to continue. If the war continues, I don't know how many soldiers will lose their families. Your Majesty, please reconsider." "Nonsense. The Qi Kingdom has the heart of a tiger and a wolf. If we concede once, there will be a second time. What are you going to do then? Continue to retreat?" An old general said angrily. In a few words, the court seemed to have developed into a vegetable market again. Emperor Jing could not hide his disappointment. There were many civil and military officials in the court, but there were countless extraordinary people. However, when they encountered real trouble, no one could help him solve his problems. Just as Dong Wenyun had said, the teachings of the ancestors could not be ignored. The Li family of the former Tang dynasty was so mighty that with a single command, all nations would obey. When would he be able to achieve this in his hands? He coughed twice and his chest began to feel stuffy again. Looking at the situation below, Jing Di could not help but feel sad. His panting became more and more serious. There was not much time left for him. A ghostly figure suddenly appeared outside the palace door. After a few flashes, it appeared beside Emperor Jing. Changde whispered a few words into Emperor Jing's ear. Emperor Jing suddenly raised his head. His eyes flashed and he asked loudly, "Really?" Changde nodded his head and said, "The messenger has been rushing about for several days to deliver the good news." After entering the palace, he fainted. "I have already sent someone from the Imperial Physician's Bureau over." He took something out of his bosom and gave it to Emperor Jing. He said, "This is the report of victory. The wax is intact. Your Majesty, please take a look. When the good news was delivered to Emperor Jing, he couldn't help but open it and look at it. All right. After quickly skimming through the contents of the letter and seeing the seal of the great general at the end, Jing Di slammed the table and laughed out loud. All the civil and military officials raised their heads. They didn't know what happy event had happened. How could His Majesty be so happy at such a critical moment? Although you are the envoy of the Qi Kingdom, you have to abide by the laws of the Jing Kingdom in the territory of the Jing Kingdom. This matter will be handled by the Supreme Court and handled according to the law. Jing Di stood up and looked at the young censor who had just spoken. He asked, "What's your name?" The young censor had just been scolded by his superior. At this time, he had not recovered. When he heard His Majesty's question, he was stunned for a moment. "Answer His Majesty's question quickly." An old man beside him gently tugged at his sleeve. He was extremely puzzled. His Majesty had instructed the Supreme Court to handle this case. His intention was to severely punish the envoy of the Kingdom of Qi. However, the strange thing was that they had selectively ignored this matter just now. "Why, your humble servant is Song Lang," the young censor hurriedly said. "Very good. As an imperial censor, I am in charge of supervision. I should be impartial and follow the law." The officials in the court saw that His Majesty had avoided the most important matter that had been discussed recently. Instead, he was praising a small censor. They couldn't help but feel confused. What was wrong with His Majesty? The envoy of the Qi Kingdom turned pale. He didn't know why the matter had taken such a sudden turn. What did the old man show Emperor Jing? Could it be impossible? Absolutely impossible. As he was thinking about this, a guard in the hall had already received his signal and led him away. "Your Majesty, the envoy's identity is special. You must not." The envoy represented the face of a country. If His Majesty punished the envoy of the Qi Kingdom over a small matter, it would be a disgrace to the Qi Kingdom. An old official's expression changed. He was about to speak when Emperor Jing impatiently waved his hand and said, "We have won a great victory at the border. The soldiers of the Jing Kingdom defeated the Qi Kingdom's army by 100,000. We killed 30,000 and captured 20,000. The rest fled in panic. General Su Dingyuan took advantage of the victory and pursued them. He has already taken 2 cities." As soon as Emperor Jing said this, the expressions of the officials in the court changed. They were dumbfounded. The first thought that came to their minds was that they didn't believe it. When did the invincible Qi Kingdom's army become so weak? Not only did the Jing Kingdom win, but it was a great victory. They had taken 2 cities. Were the soldiers of the Qi Kingdom useless? How did they do it? How could the officials not know the strength of the Jing Kingdom's army? This didn't make sense. Not to mention the civil officials, even the generals didn't believe it. At this moment, whether it was the peace faction or the war faction, everyone was thinking the same thing. Was His Majesty joking? However, even the most muddle-headed emperor wouldn't joke about this kind of thing. The whispers finally turned into earth-shaking cheers after they saw the victory report. The huge sound waves almost overturned the roof of the Golden Hole. The officials who couldn't calm down returned home. After they woke up, the news spread out with the capital as the center. That night, the emperor held a banquet in the palace and the curfew in the capital was lifted for 3 days. No matter where they went, there was a sea of cheers. All the citizens of the Jing Kingdom could walk with their backs straight. They had never been as proud as they were today. They loudly boasted about the great achievements of the Jing Kingdom soldiers. They talked about how they defeated the millions of soldiers of the Qi Kingdom with 50,000 soldiers and horses. They talked about how General Su Dingyuan was like a god who had descended to the mortal world. He summoned divine soldiers and generals to help him and beat the Qi Kingdom's army. This was a grand event that had never happened in the decades since the establishment of the Jing Kingdom. The tavern was open all night. Whether it was the scholars or the heroes of the Jianghu, they could all be seen in the small tavern. They recited poems and performed sword dances. For the past few days, the people of Qi living in the capital didn't even dare to step out of their houses. Li Yi learned from the princess that the envoy of the Qi kingdom was recuperating in the Honglu temple. He wouldn't be able to get out of bed for at least half a month. From this, it could be seen that people who exceeded the speed limit never had a good ending. Chapter 337. The power of Tianfa on the battlefield is far beyond our imagination. Different from Li Yi's focus, the princess was naturally not concerned about the envoy of Qi who was speeding. The messenger who had traveled thousands of miles to deliver the news of victory had fainted due to exhaustion after arriving at the imperial palace. Under the treatment of the imperial physician, he had woken up long ago and described the situation of the battle in detail. The Qi kingdom had a strong army and shared a border with the Jing kingdom. For decades, the two countries had been in constant conflict. The Qi kingdom's soldiers were brave and well-armed. On the battlefield, the lives of the Jing kingdom's soldiers were exchanged for the lives of the Qi kingdom's soldiers. The Qi kingdom's strength was deeply engraved in the hearts of the Jing kingdom's people. This was also the reason why the Qi kingdom's ambassador and the people of Qi could be arrogant and domineering in the capital of the Jing kingdom. However, the past could not be reversed. The Jing kingdom, which had been weak for a long time, could finally hold its head high. Under Tianfa, there was no city that could survive within 3 feet. The warhorses went out of control and the Qi kingdom's soldiers covered their heads and fled like rats, begging for mercy. General Su Dingyuan not only defeated the Qi kingdom's army but also pursued them. He used the power of Tianfa to destroy 2 cities. When they ran out of food and fodder, he sounded the gong to retreat and stationed a large number of soldiers at the border. He would return to the capital soon. Before finding a way to break Tianfa, the Qi kingdom would not act rashly. Don't rely too much on Tianfa. After all, it is just an external force. In the end, it still depends on the bravery of the soldiers and the outstanding command of the general. If the other side also discovered the secret of Tianfa, the situation will only worsen. Li Yi reminded. Li Mingzhu nodded. She looked at him and asked, "The reason why we were able to win this time is because of you. What reward do you want?" "You're exaggerating. If you really want a reward, just make me a duke. It doesn't need to be too much. 10,000 taels of gold and 1,000 acres of fertile land. This request is not too much, right?" This time, Li Yi deliberately emphasized the words 10,000 taels of gold to prevent them from fooling him with 10,000 copper coins again. Although it was said that being an official was tough, sleeping later than a dog and waking up earlier than a chicken, working tirelessly and fighting with all kinds of people, it was different to be an aristocrat who only took a salary and did not work. He had a beautiful wife and a big house. He did not need to work hard, and the country would help him achieve it. Every day, he just had to lie in the courtyard, bask in the sun and tease the little servant girls. When he had nothing to do, he would go to the brothel to listen to music and watch erotic dances. How many years would he have to work hard for? Of course, after he brought Rui over, he could forget about being a concubine. She probably wouldn't agree. Even if she agreed, Mississippi Lou probably wouldn't agree either. Once she woke up, the concubine he had just married yesterday would probably have to go to the well to look for her, not too much. Her Royal Highness looked at him with her arms crossed and said, "Since the founding of the country, there has been no title of nobility without military merit. It is as difficult as ascending to heaven to get the title of a county baron. How many dukes are there in the country now? 10,000 taels of gold and 100,000 taels of silver. Do you know how much money was spent on this expedition? If I reward you 2 more times, the national treasury will be empty. As for the 1,000 acres of fertile land, the perpetual farmland of a prince is only 10,000 acres. Do you think you can compare with 10 princes? Li Yi looked at her with contempt. She was the one who took the initiative to ask him what reward he wanted. It seemed that she could not even satisfy one of them. How could she still pretend to be generous? Forget it. They can reward me however they want. I'd better watch Li Xian fly a kite. Li Xian was getting more and more playful. He had invited several machine masters to participate in the development of the glider. In just a few days, the glider had been modified to the point that even Li Yi himself couldn't understand it. Definitely don't think about becoming a duke. As a small county lieutenant without any title, it's impossible for him to become a first-class duke in a single step. Don't even think about 10,000 taels of gold. Even if father agrees, the court officials won't agree. 1,000 acres of fertile land is also a dream. How can there be so much fertile land to reward you? Li Yi rolled his eyes at Her Royal Highness who had followed him here. If he doesn't want to give it, then he doesn't want to give it. Is there a need to ridicule him like this? However, all your contributions are not small. Father is clear about rewards and punishments. He will definitely not treat you unfairly. You should be more serious. Don't always think about fooling around with him. Seeing Li Yi's absent-minded look, Mingzu frowned and said. Li Xian showed that he had been implicated even though he was not doing anything. He walked over and said discontentedly, "What do you mean by fooling around with me? I'm also sharing Uncle Emperor's worries. Think about it. If they could fly higher, wouldn't they be the best spies on the battlefield? How many soldiers, horses, provisions and fodder does the enemy have? How many routes they are divided into, how the terrain is, and where the ambush is? Wouldn't it be clear at a glance?" In order to prove that he was not fooling around with him, Li Yi added, "Think about it. If our people fly above the enemy and throw down all the heavenly punishment they carry, what will happen?" In his lifetime, Li Xian's creation of the most primitive bomber was something to look forward to. As long as something beneficial to the country was mentioned, Her Royal Highness would immediately become serious. She looked at the guard who could already fly over the treetops thoughtfully. "Your Majesty, the envoy of the Qi Kingdom has recuperated in the office of the Grand Herald for a few days. After presenting the memorial, he is ready to leave the capital." Emperor Jing did not seem to hear Changda's words. He played with a clay pot without a fuse in his hand and said, "It's a pity that I didn't see the Jing Kingdom's soldiers defeat the Qi Kingdom's army with my own eyes. Subject Su's contributions in this battle cannot go unnoticed. He will be conferred the title of Great General who supports the kingdom. When the army returns, I will personally come out to welcome them and reward them." A rare smile appeared on Changda's dead face. This victory was of great significance to the Jing Kingdom. His Majesty's long-cherished wish was to make the Jing Kingdom stronger in his lifetime so that it would no longer be bullied by foreign countries. Now, he had finally taken the most important step. With this battle, His Majesty's prestige would increase greatly. It would be enough to shut the mouths of countless people in the imperial court. Subject Yen reported today that the appearance of horseshoes has reduced the cost of horses by more than 60%. The Ministry of Justice has also submitted an official document, intending to vigorously implement the law of interrogation in Anxi County. If this law can be implemented in all counties, it will reduce many cruel officials. The Imperial Physicians Bureau has jointly submitted a petition to claim credit for Anxi County Lieutenant Li Yi. His cardiopulmonary resuscitation and suturing of wounds have made great contributions and can save countless lives. They are even more useful on the battlefield. In the battle with the Qi Kingdom, if not for his heavenly punishment, we would probably still have lost, let alone seize the city and expand the territory. Emperor Jing muttered to himself. One by one, he was very familiar with the things that Li Yi had done in the past 6 months. I can see that he is an unexpected soldier. In terms of governing the country, most people in the imperial court are better than him. However, no one can replace what he can do. The smile on Changda's face deepened. He said, "Today is the 60th birthday of the old mistress of the Li family. That lazy boy can't wait to get as far away from the capital as possible. We must be careful that he doesn't run away." Emperor Jing smiled and said, "I am glad that I went to Qing and Prefecture that time. Otherwise, how could I have gained so much, father, father?" A clear voice suddenly sounded from the door of the hall. A smiling figure ran in. The two guards behind her ran into the hall. They looked terrified and were about to kneel down to ask for forgiveness. Emperor Jing waved his hand and said, "That's enough. You can leave." Then, he turned his head to look at the little girl in palace attire and asked, "Shanning, why are you free to come to father's place today?" "I just came to see father." The little girl giggled and skipped over. Chapter 338. Jing Di held the little girl in his arms and gently scratched her nose. He said, "Tell me, why are you looking for me?" "You are not allowed to let me hit teacher." In the eyes of the courtiers and people, he was the emperor above all others. However, in front of his children, he just wanted to be a good father. "Oh, I have already forgiven teacher for hitting him." The little girl twisted her body and said, "Shanning wants to eat hot pot." "What is hot pot?" Jing Di was startled. A trace of doubt appeared on his face as he asked. "Father doesn't know." The little girl was a little surprised. In her heart, her father was omniscient. She never thought that there was something that her father didn't know. After being surprised, she waved her little hand and said, "Then, father, help Shanning catch a bad person and bring him into the palace." When he looked down and saw the little girl's eyes moving around, he knew that this was her purpose. He felt a little funny and asked, "Tell father, which bad person dares to offend our Shanning?" "Father, put him in prison to help you vent your anger." "No, no." The little girl shook her head like a rattle drum and hurriedly said, "Father, you can't put him in prison. Otherwise, no one will cook delicious food for Shanning." "Nonsense. Didn't I say not to eat outside? What does your sister think of you?" "You are not allowed to leave the palace in the future." Jing Di frowned and said, "I didn't eat indiscriminately at Brother Xian's house. My sister also ate, and Brother Xian also ate. Shanning was very obedient and didn't eat indiscriminately outside." The little girl hurriedly explained, "Father took him into the palace and made him cook for Shanning. He was not allowed to eat. He was so angry that he stole Shanning's meat to eat. By the way, his name is Li Yi." The little girl said with a vengeance. "Li Yi." Hearing this name, Jing Di smiled and rubbed the little girl's head. He said, "Well, he dared to offend our Shanning. In 2 days, father will take him into the palace and specially cook for you, okay? Father loves Shanning the most." A satisfied expression appeared on the little girl's face. She couldn't wait to see the scene in her imagination. The old madam's 60th birthday was a rare occasion for the Li family. The house was decorated with lanterns and streamers. Every few steps, a huge lantern was hung, illuminating the Li mansion as if it was daytime. The servants of the Li family stood at the door, ushering in the guests who came to celebrate the old madam's birthday. Li Mingze and Li Mingyuan would personally welcome the distinguished guests. Of course, welcoming the guests had nothing to do with Li Yi. He had only been here for a few days and did not know any of the guests. He sat far away and watched the guests come and go with boredom. It was not until today that he found out why the Li family could be stable in the capital for so many years, even if they did not get along with the High Dukes. In just 2 hours, 2 High Dukes sent gifts. Although they did not come in person, at least their attitude had been expressed. As for the other large and small families, there were countless of them. He had long heard that the water in the capital was very deep, and the relationships between the influential families were very complicated. For those families that had many years of inheritance, even if there was no successor, it was not that easy to topple them. It was rare that little fatty Li Yingkai didn't hold on to his snacks and gobble them down. He hid in a deserted corner next to Li Yi, shook his head, and mumbled something. A few naughty kids who wanted to play with him were all sent away by him. Lu Rui was not by Li Yi's side. She was the only one who was favored by the old madam. After she brought mahjong to the Li family, the young and old madams who had nothing to do all day went crazy. The capital seemed to be a lucky place for Mississippi Lu. Today she won a pair of bracelets, tomorrow she won a hairpin. If she did not like it, she would give it to the servant girl sent by the old madam to serve her. In just a few days, she became the most willing master of the Li family servant girls. It was said that through her aunt, mahjong had begun to spread among the circle of the noble ladies in the capital. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the Li family's craftsmen made a lot of money. Of course, compared to the money Mississippi Lu made, it was only a drizzle. It seemed that Mississippi Lu did not intend to go back at all. She was carefree every day and made a lot of money. Li Yi was in a hurry. In a few days, he would tell the old madam that his vacation was over and it was time to return to Qing and prefecture. After all, no matter how low the county lieutenant was, he was still an official and received a salary from the state. It was not advisable to work for free. Not far away, Li Mingze had just welcomed a person in. He excused himself and left in a hurry. The man in embroidered robes looked around. When his gaze swept past a certain place, his expression froze. He then strode over. "It's over. Big brother, I forgot again." The chubby boy walked over dejectedly and sat beside Li Yi. His round face turned bitter. Li Yi wanted to help but could not. Out of a humanitarian spirit, he helped the chubby boy find a suitable poem. When the time came, he would give it to the old madam to make her happy. Unexpectedly, the chubby boy could not memorize 4 simple lines of the poem after a long time. He could not help him memorize the poem, so he could only rely on himself for the rest. "Why don't you take out your precious candied plums?" Li Yi suggested. If he really could not memorize it, he would have something he could take out and it would not be too embarrassing. "No, let me memorize a little more. I'm almost there." The chubby boy refused to admit defeat and quickly squatted in a corner to recite. "It's really you." A surprised voice came from the side. Li Yi turned his head and saw a middle-aged man in embroidered robes walking towards him. "Aren't you in Qing and prefecture? Why are you in the capital?" The man sat directly opposite Li Yi and asked in surprise. "You are the person who stole the plaque." The middle-aged man looked familiar. Li Yi thought for a while and recalled his identity. "What do you mean by stealing the plaque?" The middle-aged man slammed the table and said. "Taking without asking is considered stealing, isn't it?" Li Yi replied indifferently. In his heart, he was recalling what Professor Feng and Magistrate Dong had said to him that day. The man was a high-ranking official in the capital and seemed to be the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. There were 2 assistant ministers in the Ministry of Personnel, and one of them was Li Mingze, his second uncle. This Sir Yan in front of him should be the right assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Thinking about it this way, it was not surprising that he came to the old madam's birthday banquet. "Didn't I tell you when I took it?" Li Yi had nothing to say in response to the assistant minister's bold and confident words. That was indeed not stealing, but robbing. "Why are you in the Li family?" "Oh, right, your surname is also Li. Are you a distant relative of the Li family and are you here to celebrate the old madam's birthday?" "That can't be right. I've never heard of the Li family having any distant relatives in Qing and prefecture." The middle-aged man was obviously unwilling to argue with Li Yi about whether it was stealing or robbing. He looked him up and down and asked in confusion. Qing and Prefecture, your name is Li Yi. After looking Li Yi up and down, the middle-aged man suddenly realized something and revealed a surprised expression. You are Li Minggen's son. Chapter 339. I really didn't expect that Li Minghan would have a son like you. The surprise on Yan Zhang's face deepened as he clicked his tongue. During the trip to Qing and Prefecture, the young man in front of him had left a deep impression on him. It wasn't just because of his amazing attainments in calligraphy and painting. After that day, driven by curiosity, he learned more about him from his old friend Dong Wenyun. The author of the Teachings of the World was unparalleled in poetry. His line, "Love the upper floors," made countless scholars blush and reformed torture methods. Of course, Yan Zhang still loved his semi-cursive script the most. He copied the 3 words on the plaque day and night and could now emit 80 to 90% of its charm. Last time, he didn't ask Li Yi for advice because of his pride. After returning to the capital, he regretted his pride greatly. What was pride compared to the improvement of calligraphy? Yan Zhang hadn't expected to meet him again at the Li clan. His heart ached, and when he saw the wine cup on the table, his eyes lit up. He poured some wine into the cup, and using a piece of paper as a pen, he wrote 3 words on the table with his finger. He raised his head to look at Li Yi and asked, "How is it?" Li Yi lowered his head and saw the 3 words, "County Magistrately," that hadn't dried yet. He wrote them in a natural and elegant manner, faintly resembling the style of the sage of calligraphy, Wang Shiji. Just from these 3 words, it could be seen that Assistant Minister Yan's calligraphy had reached a higher level. So. Li Yi gave a very pertinent evaluation. Wang Shiji's reputation as a sage of calligraphy was inseparable from decades of hard work. Just by copying the 3 words for a few days, he was able to learn half of its charm. The description "so" was already a great compliment. Yan Zhang naturally understood this. The more he copied the 3 words, the more he understood the difference between him and the person who wrote it. He wouldn't use age to judge whether the young man in front of him had the qualifications to say these words. However, Yan Zhang understood this didn't mean that everyone understood. So. You're so arrogant. Although Yan Zhang's calligraphy is not good, it's not something you can judge. A voice came from the side. It was an elegant man who looked at the words on the table. The elegant man walked around the table with his hands behind his back and said in surprise, TSK, long time no see. Brother Yan's semi-cursive script has become more refined. Did you steal another famous family's horizontal board and study it these days? Yan Zhang was displeased. What did he mean by his calligraphy was not good? Although this guy came from a scholarly family, the Zhuo family's calligraphy master was old Master Zhuo, not Zhuo. Why was he so proud? Master Zhuo's calligraphy is upright and can be said to be the best in the Jing kingdom. Compared to him, my calligraphy is naturally not presentable. Since Junior Supervisor Zhuo has inherited Master Zhuo's teachings, I naturally cannot compare to Junior Supervisor Zhuo, Yan Zhang replied sarcastically. Master of Zhuo. Ziti Zhuo was Zhuo bite. On the surface, it was a compliment, but it was a sarcastic remark that Zhuo only relied on his father and didn't have any real talent. Although the two of them were family friends and were usually close friends, whenever they talked about something that they were good at, they would always mock each other a little. Zhuo looked at the table for a while with his hands behind his back. When the words on the table became blurred, he nodded and said, Strange. I haven't seen you for a few days, but you've made such great progress. Did you really get advice from a master, or did you find a famous card? Yan Zhang twitched the corner of his mouth and said, Let's not talk about this for now. You keep saying that this young man is arrogant. Why don't you compete with him? You're also good at semi-cursive script. Write a few words on the table with your fingers. Let's see who the arrogant one is. Zhuqiu shook his head and said, it's better to compete with you. But him. If people know, they'll say that I'm bullying the younger generation. Shiping stone scripture. Yan Zhang looked at him and said, if you think your writing is better, I'll give you the Shiping stone scripture. If you lose, don't blame me for tearing down the horizontal board of the House of Zhua tonight. Zhuqiu's eyes suddenly lit up, and he said with uncertainty, you mean the original post of the Shiping stone scripture? It's really with you. The Shiping stone scripture was the masterpiece of the creator of the flying weight style, Kai Yong of the Eastern Han Dynasty. The original post was very valuable for collection and research. It would be a blessing to get it. As for the horizontal board of the House of Zhua, he didn't worry about it at all. His calligraphy attainments were not great, but they could be described as minor achievements. How could he lose to a young man who was still wet behind the ears? Even if he started practicing since he was in his mother's womb, he couldn't beat him. What do you think? Do you dare? Yan Zhang looked at him and asked with a smile. Why not? Zhuqiu laughed and said, it's rare for you to be so generous. How can I spoil your fun? After that, he dipped his finger in the wine. In a flash, the 4 big words, happiness like the East Sea, appeared on the table. He wrote the words smoothly and continuously. Zhuqiu's calligraphy attainments could be remarkable if he could write with his finger dipped in wine. Ordinary people couldn't even write with a brush. Come on, it's your turn. Yan Zhang didn't look at Zhuqiu's words at all. With a cunning smile on his face, he was already planning how to tear down the Zhuo family's horizontal board at night. He hurriedly urged Li Yi. Zhuqiu wanted his Shiping stone scripture. It was impossible. It would be better if it was Elder Zhua. Even if Elder Zhua came in person, Yan Zhang was 70% sure that he could win. Seeing Yan Zhang's expression, Zhuqiu's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly had a bad feeling. Yan Zhang was not a fool. The Shiping stone scripture must be extremely important to him. How could he give it away for free? Could it be that he was really sure that he could win? Turning to look at the young man again, Zhuqiu shook his head and suppressed this unrealistic idea. I'm not interested. Li Yi glanced at the words on the table and said, shaking his head. The Shiping stone scripture and the Zhuo family's horizontal board had nothing to do with him. This assistant minister Yan has a good plan. He's treating me as a tool. Are they familiar with each other? Tearing down someone else's horizontal board is no different from slapping him in the face. This is a great feud. Yan Zhang's expression froze. He hurriedly grabbed Zhuqiu's arm and said, I owe you one. Li Yi thought, last time when I snatched the horizontal board, I already owed him a favor, but he didn't take it seriously. Obviously, the assistant minister's favor is worthless. However, Li Yi didn't want to be pestered by him. He casually dipped his finger into the wine and drew 2 words on the table. He was ready to leave this troublesome place and let them catch up. Is this what you're relying on? Seeing the messy handwriting on the table, Zhuqiu was stunned at first. Then, he smiled and patted Yan Zhang's shoulder. He said, Brother Yan, tomorrow morning, I'll send someone to your mansion to get the Shiping stone scripture. Yan Zhang didn't expect that Li Yi wouldn't give him face at all. He was a little anxious and grabbed Li Yi's arm tightly. Write it carefully. If you win, you can make a request of me, as long as it's not too much. Stop it, second young Master Yan, what are you doing? Just as Yan Zhang shook Li Yi's arm violently, a delicate voice suddenly came from not far away. Chapter 340. The dignified Right Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel could not help but shiver after hearing that voice. He hurriedly let go of Li Yi's shoulder and turned around to explain, "No, nothing." The beautiful woman walked over quickly and asked Li Yi, what were you doing just now? Did he bully you?" "Sister-in-law, you misunderstood," Yan Zhang said bitterly. He was not afraid of his father or his eldest brother at home, but he was afraid of this tough sister-in-law. How could he dare to admit it now? "No." Li Yi shook his head. He had only heard that his aunt's husband's surname was Yan, but he did not expect it to be this Yan family. The woman looked at Yan Zhang suspiciously and then said to Li Yi, "In a quarter of an hour, bring Ying Kai to the hall to celebrate old madam's birthday with a few juniors." "Got it." Li Yi nodded as he glanced at the little fatty who was still mumbling in the corner. Seeing his sister-in-law leave, Yan Zhang heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. He turned to look at Li Yi and said, "Even if it's not for my sake, for the sake of sister-in-law, let that arrogant person know that there is always someone better out there." "How about that?" Li Yi thought for a moment. Looking at the almost dry handwriting on the table, he wet his fingertip and wrote, "Longevity as long as the South Mountain, next to fortune as vast as the East Sea." He wiped his hands, walked to the little fatty and said, "Let's go, how about it? Do you still want the accelerating peace stone scripture?" Yan Zhang said proudly when he saw Suiqiu staring at the handwriting on the table in a daze. Suiqiu opened his mouth but could not say that he had one no matter what. The plaque on the Zhuo family's gate was important, but so was his face. He wasn't shameless enough to say that he wasn't as skilled as others. "I lost. This young man. Where did you find him?" Suiqiu sighed and looked up at him. Under the temptation of the accelerating peace stone scripture, his normal thinking ability had been affected. After so many years of dealing with Yan Zhang, he should have known that a cunning man like Yan Zhang would not make a losing deal. He knew from the beginning that he would win, so he deliberately used the accelerating peace stone scripture to provoke him. His purpose had always been to get the plaque on the Zhuo family's gate. Yan Zhang said jokingly, "That's none of your business. I just want to ask you one question. Do you still mean what you said just now?" "Of course." Suiqiu secretly cursed the old fox in his heart. Just now, he had taken advantage of his contempt for the young man. Who would have thought that an inexperienced boy could write such a beautiful semi-cursive script? The plaque on the gate of the Zhuo family is right there. If you have the ability, come and get it. Suiqiu left as if he was escaping after saying that. Yan Zhang carefully thought about what Suiqiu said just now. What did Suiqiu mean by, "Take it if you can"? Without his permission, the old master of the Zhuo family would not let him off. Yan Zhang carefully thought about what he just said. What did he mean by, "Take it if you can"? Without his permission, Grandpa Zhuo wouldn't let him off the hook if he took the plaque off the Zhuo's gate. There were actually many people in the younger generation of the Li family, including the collateral branches. However, Li Yi did not know any of them except for the little fatty. "Grandma, I wish you happiness as boundless as the East Sea and longevity as the pine tree in Nanshan. This is my congratulatory gift to you." "Grandma, I wish you happiness as boundless as the East Sea and longevity as the pine tree in Nanshan. This is my congratulatory gift to you." The younger generation stood respectfully at the bottom of the hall according to the order. They repeated the same congratulatory words over and over again. The gifts were not very expensive, so the old lady accepted them all with a smile. In return, she gave a red envelope, which might be even more expensive than the gifts from the younger generation. The little fatty was waiting anxiously. According to the order, the main branch was the last to be presented. The problem was that he might forget the poem he had just memorized. The little fatty's mother glanced at him from afar. This child would not tell them about the congratulatory gift for the old lady this year, nor did he ask them to prepare it for her. Even now, she did not know what he was going to give the old lady. The little fatty looked anxious. When it was finally his turn, He immediately ran up and said loudly, "I've composed a poem. I'd like to take this opportunity to present it to you, Grandma." The old lady was slightly stunned. Then she smiled and said, "Great, even our Inkai can compose poems. Quick, let me hear it." Everyone in the Lee family, including the little fatty's parents, looked surprised. Inkai was famous for not being good at studying. He could not even recognize words. When did he learn to compose poems? The guests all had looks of interest on their faces. Previously, the juniors had only given them some mundane things. Occasionally, they would see something different, and that piqued their interest. This child, what nonsense! Lee Mingyuan frowned and said in a low voice. Ignoring the crowd, the little fatty pointed at the old lady and began to shake his head. "This woman is not human." At this point, the voice paused for a moment and a thoughtful expression appeared on his face. After that, he didn't continue. "What?" Everyone's expression froze when they heard that. The guests stared at the descendant, and the Lee family was dumbfounded. "Bastard, what are you talking about?" Seeing that his son's first sentence was disrespectful to the old lady, Lee Mingyuan's face darkened and he strode over. The next moment, he finally thought of the next sentence. The pondering expression on the little fatty's face disappeared. He pointed at the Lee family and said loudly, "All the children and grandchildren are thieves." The guests held back their laughter, and the faces of the Lee family began to twitch. Lee Mingyuan walked over and raised his hand high. He shouted sternly, "Shut up." A few black lines appeared on Li Yi's face. A good poem that could change according to circumstances had been recited by little fatty in such a manner. It could be said that there was no one in the past and no one in the future who could do it. He walked forward helplessly and said, "Third uncle, please wait. I've been listening to Inkai reciting a poem today. The whole poem is this woman is not human, a fairy from the 9 heavens descending to the mortal world. All the children and grandchildren are thieves, stealing the immortal peaches and longevity for their loved ones." I think he must have been too nervous just now and memorized the wrong sequence. "Yes, that's it. That's it." The little fatty hid behind Li Yi and went down the slope. A fairy from the 9 heavens descending to the mortal world, stealing the immortal peaches and longevity for their loved ones. Hee, what a changing poem. Wonderful, wonderful. To be able to write such a poem, he must have some talent. The poem is plain and simple. It's not strange to say that it was written by a child. Everyone present was a high-ranking official and had received higher education. After understanding it, they looked at the little fatty and started chatting with a smile. Lee Mingyuan looked at his son with a face full of doubt. He knew his son very well. It was already a miracle that he could write the 4 lines of the poem without a single mistake, let alone composing a poem. Could it be that this child had been hiding his talent all this while? The old mistress was very happy and praised the little fatty. She picked an expensive gift from the pile of congratulatory gifts and gave it to him on the spot. The little fatty hugged the gift and returned with a smile. According to the order, after the little fatty was second uncle's son, Li Yingjie, followed by Li Yi. Other than the mutation caused by the little fatty, the Li family's genes were pretty good. A handsome young man took an item from second Aunt Fong and walked to the old mistress. He smiled and said, "This is Xiao Chun's longevity painting. It's my congratulatory gift to Grandma. I wish Grandma a long and happy life." It's Xiao Chun's longevity painting. It said that he needs half a year to complete one. It's not easy to get it without 1,000 taels of silver. Although Xiao Chun is young, he's quite talented in calligraphy. Many young people like his calligraphy. He's quite thoughtful to get Xiao Chun's longevity painting. As the crowd discussed, the old mistress accepted the gift with a smile and opened it in front of everyone. Immediately, several people surrounded it. Longevity painting. Li Yi frowned slightly and pondered. What's going on? Lu Rui walked to his side and asked with a frown as well. Opposite them, the wife of the Li family's master, Madame Fong, glanced over and revealed an unnoticeable smile. Chapter 341. Second brother, why did you get the longevity painting too? The little fatty had almost been put on the spot. After retreating, he stood obediently by his parents' side. When he saw his second brother presenting the congratulatory gift to his grandmother, he scratched his head and said with some doubt, "What's the matter? What do you mean? Who else gave the longevity painting to?" Li Mingyuan was still wondering if his son was really hiding his talents so well that even he, as his father, could not see through it. When he heard his son's soft murmur, he subconsciously asked. The little fatty scratched his head and said, "Big brother too. I saw him preparing the gift in his room 2 days ago. I think he said it was something called the longevity painting too." Really? The little fatty's mother asked in surprise. The biggest taboo when giving a gift was to be exactly the same as someone else's, especially when it was inferior to others. It would definitely be embarrassing in front of so many guests. It was the same longevity painting, but the famous scholar Zhao Chun's work was far superior to others. When the two of them presented their gifts one after another, everyone would naturally compare them. At that time, one of them would definitely look bad. It's true. If you don't believe me, you can ask second aunt. She even asked me that day. The little fatty patted his chest and said. Second sister-in-law. The Yun matriarch raised her head and looked at Madame Fong, who was standing not far away. She immediately understood. She was purposely trying to embarrass Big Brother's child in front of so many people. However, although he despised her method of using such a method to make things difficult for her own family, it was her freedom to give whatever gift she wanted. It was not good to criticize her. What should we do? Lu Rui stood beside Li Yi and asked softly. What do you mean, what should we do? He gave it to him, and I gave it to me. We'll do what we have to do, replied Li Yi. He glanced at Madame Fong. He did not expect her to be so narrow-minded. How could she do something like this? The little fatty was heartless, and it would be easy for her to get information out of him. Rui already knew what gift Li Yi was going to give to old mistress. Hearing the words of the people around him, he roughly knew that the longevity painting that was presented just now should be quite precious. If Li Yi were to present his own, it would definitely be inferior. Why don't you give me this sword? Lu Rui raised her hand and handed over the sword that she always carried with her. Li Yi saw a flash of reluctance in her eyes. She had been carrying this sword with her since the first time he met Mississippi Lu. She did not sell it even during the most difficult times of her life. This was indeed a rare good sword. When Li Yi first wanted to borrow it to play with, she didn't even let him touch it. Forget it. Li Yi pushed the sword back. How much was face worth? Only Madame Fong cared about her face. Li Yi did not think that his face was more important than Mississippi Lu's beloved sword. After speaking, Li Yingjie walked down. Li Yi smiled at Mississippi Lu and walked up with the painting scroll. This is. Some of the guests were confused when they saw an unfamiliar young man walk up after Li Yingjie. He should be the son of the Li family's Dalong. I heard that a few days ago, the Li family found their eldest grandson and welcomed him into the manor. It should be him. Soon, everyone's eyes were on Li Yi. Most of them were very clear about the changes that happened to the Li family 20 years ago. The eldest grandson of the Li family, who had recently returned to the family, naturally received a lot of attention. A cold smile appeared on Madame Fong's face when she saw Li Yi holding something that looked like a painting scroll. Li Yi walked to the front of old mistress and said with a smile, "Your grandson has personally created a painting called Longevity Painting. I wish grandmother a prosperous life with the sun and the moon, as well as a spring crane. The longevity painting. A look of surprise appeared on the faces of the guests. The longevity painting again. The painting that Li Yingjie gave was Zhao Chun's work. Many officials and nobles in the capital liked to collect paintings. The eldest grandson of the Li family also gave a longevity painting. From what he said just now, it seemed that he wrote it himself. One was worth 1,000 taels of gold, while the other was probably just a piece of waste paper. His gift was similar to the one that the little fatty gave just now. The similarity was that they didn't need to spend too much effort and could save a lot of money. Li Yingjie, who had just stood at his spot, was slightly stunned. He turned around to look at his mother and then at his brother, whom he was not very familiar with. His expression was a little dazed. Good, good. Old Madame Fong looked at him kindly and did not show any other expression because of the words, longevity painting. She smiled and said, "Thank you, Since I have accepted the longevity painting, I will give this knight Emingsu to you." Old Madame Fong did not open it in front of Li Yi. She handed the painting scroll to a servant girl and personally picked out a brocade box from the pile of gifts. She placed it in Li Yi's hands with a smile. All the guests, including the Li family members present, were stunned. In terms of value, the picture of 10,000 years was probably the least valuable of all the gifts tonight. However, the old madame's gift in return was the most valuable. Not to mention Li Yingjie, who had also given a picture of 10,000 years, even the gift she gave to little fatty just now was far from comparable. Old Madame Fong's action caused everyone to look at Li Yi in a different light. Old Madame Fong was at least half the reason why the Li family was able to survive for so many years. Under such an occasion, she naturally would not do anything unnecessary. There must be a deeper meaning behind her action. Madame Fong's face was so gloomy that it was about to drip water. She didn't think that the old madam would protect him to such an extent that she would casually give the jade bracelet that had been passed down in the family to an outsider. They were both longevity painting, but the one that her son gave was thousands of times more precious than his, yet the effect was completely opposite. Did the old madam really think that way? In the next moment, Madame Fong's dark expression disappeared and she immediately put on a smile. She walked up and said, "Since this is old Madame Fong's gift in return, you must put it away carefully. If I had known that nephew's gift was also longevity painting, I would have asked Yingjie to prepare something else. Speaking of which, nephew is considerate. Although Zhao Chun's longevity painting is good, he is an outsider. How can it be as precious as a family member's gift?" Madame Fong smiled and walked to the servant girl's side. She took the painting scroll from her hands and praised, "Yingjie has never had the heart to study since he was young. Nephew has indeed inherited eldest brother's talent. I believe this longevity painting will not be bad. Why don't you open it and take a look to make old Madame Fong happy?" As she spoke, she opened the painting scroll and placed it on the table beside her. Old Madame Fong frowned. She wanted to stop her, but it was too late. The guests nearby quickly surrounded them. Chapter 342. Grandma, this is too expensive. I can't accept it. The Emingsu was very valuable, not to mention that it was a gift from his sister-in-law. Li Yi quickly put the box back. He was not very interested in this kind of treasure. A pearl that emitted a faint fluorescent light was nothing. It could only light up an area the size of a palm. It was not even comparable to a 15-watt light bulb. We're family. It's not expensive. Just take it. Old Grandma smiled and stuffed the item back into Li Yi's hands. She had always felt extremely guilty towards her child who had been wandering outside for 20 years. What was a Emingsu? Could it make up for what she owed him all these years? Li Yi held the box containing the Emingsu in his hands. He did not know how to reject old grandma's insistence. A few surprised voices came from not far away. This 10,000 years painting does have some foundation. Interesting. Look, when these longevity characters are put together, doesn't it look like a spirit ape holding a peach? Take 2 steps back and you'll see it more clearly. The 2 longevity paintings have their own merits. This one is not as good as Zhao Chun's in terms of foundation, but it wins in novelty. Not bad. The longevity painting, personally made by the eldest grandson of the Leaf family, was clearly not as mediocre as everyone had expected. It could not be compared to Chen Chun, who had already reached a high level in the art of calligraphy, but it was still above average. What was rare was that he had taken a different approach. He had used 100 longevity characters of various sizes to form the peach offering by the spirit ape, adding another layer of meaning. He had also spent a lot of effort. Madame Fong's face darkened when she did not see the scene she had expected. Let me take a look. A figure squeezed in from the back. Seeing the person, they all made way. Every member of the Zhuo family was a master of calligraphy. Old Master Zhuo, who was still alive, had a superb regular script. Although Zhuo Qiu was not as famous as Old Master Zhuo, he was only second to a few grandmasters and was far from being a match for these laymen. Zhuo Qiu picked up the scroll and admired it as he paced around, but he did not make any comments. Actually, the 10,000 lifespan painting did not really have 10,000 longevity characters. It was just a measure to describe a large number. The most commonly seen one should be called the 100 lifespan painting. The one in Zhuo Qiu's hand was the century lifespan painting. The reason why the longevity painting was so popular was not because of the simple stacking of longevity characters. Each longevity character was written in a different way. Zhao Chun's longevity painting was extremely orderly. Although each character had a different shape, they were similar in size. Each line was vertical, and it was very neat. It was not an exaggeration to call it the longevity painting. In comparison, the one in Zhuo Qiu's hand was the real longevity painting. Putting aside the longevity character, from afar, this was clearly a painting of a spirit ape presenting a peach. Just from this, it could be seen that the person was not only skilled in calligraphy, but also in painting. Of course, Zhuo Qiu did not care about the painting. His eyes were attracted by the longevity characters, big or small, straight or slanted. Although Zhao Chun was famous, Zhuo Qiu felt that he was still very immature. If he wanted to find faults, he could find 10,000 flaws in the 10,000 lifespan painting. However, he could not find a single mistake in the painting in front of him. It was as if it was truly flawless. Of course, flawless did not exist. The only possibility was that he was not good enough to find any mistakes. Of course, he could not find any mistakes. Wang Shiji, Yan Jinqing, Ouyang Sun, Zhao Mingfu, Lu Gongquan. The 10,000 lifespan painting was a combination of the works of countless calligraphy grandmasters. Regular script, semi-cursive script, and dozens of different characters were all created by the creator at his peak. If Zhuo Qiu could find any flaws in it, he would have been famous all over the world. In order to obtain this painting, he had temporarily put aside the scriptures that the old monk had asked for. He had consumed all the books on calligraphy and painting in the library. Mississippi Lu had come to him several times to play fight the landlord, but in the end, she stayed in the room as a maid to grind the ink. If he could not get something decent out of it, it would be a waste of his hard work for the past 2 days. Good calligraphy, good calligraphy. Holding the painting, Zhuo Qiu seemed to be intoxicated by it. He slowly walked through the crowd and gradually walked away under everyone's gaze. Bah, shameless guy. How dare he covet old Madame's gift? Yan Zhang was the first to react. They had known each other for many years, so he naturally knew Zhuo Qiu's character. His expression changed, and he hurriedly chased after him. After a while, Zhuqiu put the 10,000 lifespan painting on the table with a regretful expression. With such a painting, he did not need any ancient calligraphy anymore. What a pity, what a pity. The guests were dumbfounded. Was it necessary for him to do this for a painting? The eldest grandson of the Li family was not a famous calligrapher. Was it worth it for Zhuqiu to do this? However, seeing that the two of them were staring at the painting and were unwilling to look away, even the slowest person would understand what was going on. This painting did not seem ordinary. When Zhao Chun took out the 10,000 lifespan painting, the two of them did not even look at it. There were those who were amazed, and there were those who were doubtful. However, there were even more people who doubted the identity of the owner of the painting. The eldest grandson of the Li family said that he had personally created this painting. However, how could it be something that could attract the attention of two skilled calligraphers to come from a young man? The old mistress personally put away the painting of 10,000 years, the smile on her face even wider. To her, it was enough as long as she knew that this was a congratulatory gift from her grandson. As for Zhuqiu and Yan Zhang, they were surrounded by several people, and faint voices could be heard. How is this longevity painting compared to Zhao Chun's? Can't be compared. That is Zhao Chun. They are both young people. It's possible for him to surpass Zhao Chun, but young supervisor's Wai is being too humble by saying that he is far behind him. Li Yi was playing with Mississippi Lu's sword in his hand, wasting time in boredom. People in the ancient times celebrated their birthday, unlike in modern times, where they could eat after cutting a cake and saying a few words of happy birthday. After going through a few complicated formalities, the chubby boy's stomach had been growling for at least a quarter of an hour, but he still hadn't received the order to start eating. The two men, who combined were older than the old mistress, sat beside Li Yi. They had been coaxing and pestering him for a long time, and they only had one request, which was for the old mistress's 10,000 years painting. Of course, Li Yi rejected such an unreasonable request without a second thought. Writing this painting was too exhausting, and he had not finished copying the scripture that he had promised the old monk. After the old mistress's birthday banquet, he would be leaving the capital city in a few days, so how would he have the time to write for them? Chapter 343. Vice Supervisor Zhua and Assistant Minister Yen said that Zhao Chun's longevity painting couldn't be compared to the painting of the young master of the Li family. Moreover, the other party is a few years younger than Zhao Chun. Could it be that the Li family really has a monster in this generation? The guests were all amazed when they talked about what had just happened. Zhao Chun was successful at a young age. Although he didn't have any dazzling achievements in the imperial examinations, his calligraphy and painting were top-notch. He was famous in the capital and left his peers far behind. Of course, Zhao Chun was still too young and inexperienced, so he couldn't be compared to real masters like Zhuqiu and Yan Zhang. However, an even younger talent had surpassed Zhao Chun in calligraphy and made Zhuqiu admit that he was not as good as him. Other than a monster, no one knew what else to describe him. It was actually a good thing for a big family to have such a monster. It would be of great help to the spread of fame and the continuation of the family. However, the situation of the Li family was different. The eldest branch had disappeared 20 years ago, and the one in power now was the second master of the Li family. If the younger generation of the Li family was as mediocre as before, the position of the head of the family would still be passed to the eldest son of the second branch even if the family declined. At such a critical moment, the eldest grandson of the Li family, who could be called a monster, had returned. The attitude of the old mistress was unclear. Who would be the next head of the family? Of course, these were not things that they should worry about. Anyone with a sharp mind would be able to tell from the gloomy expression of the matriarch's wife that there was an undercurrent beneath the calm. The Li family had already declined, and the Fong family wasn't easy to get along with. No one knew how they would settle this family matter. Li Yi wasn't too interested in whether or not there was an undercurrent. At this moment, he was thinking about something else. He had made an agreement with the old monk that after the old woman's birthday, someone from the cold mountain temple would go down the mountain to get the scriptures. Xuanzang had gone through 81 difficulties and traveled thousands of miles in order to get the scriptures. He had suffered a lot and suffered a lot. He had been put in a steamer by various ferries and was almost steamed into a bun. Only then did he succeed. The old monk had only been delayed for a few days. It was too easy to get the scriptures. The capital was a place where anything could happen. Just as Li Yi was hesitating about how many days he should drag things out, a huge bald head appeared in his line of sight. At the same time, the surrounding guests also felt that their surroundings seemed to have brightened up. That is, Grandmaster Tan Yin, that's Grandmaster Tan Yin. Why is Master Tan Yin here? Could it be that he is also here to celebrate the old madam's birthday? The sudden appearance of a bald head in a room full of guests was very eye-catching. If this bald head was a famous monk in the capital who had received the royal family's hospitality many times, it would be difficult not to attract attention. There were countless Buddhist believers, and there were also many devout believers present. How could they not know Grandmaster Tan Yin of the Cold Mountain Temple? After receiving the servant's report, the old madam did not dare to delay and immediately came to greet him. She first bowed respectfully and then said, "I didn't know that Grandmaster would come and I was not able to welcome you. It is really impolite of me." At this time, Li Mingze, the master of the Li family, could only stand aside and did not have the right to speak. The old monk had his trademark smile on his face and said, "Madam, you don't have to be so courteous. I have come specially to celebrate your birthday. I don't have anything valuable on me, so I have a small gift. A handwritten copy of the Diamond Sutra is for you." A little monk behind him immediately handed over a simple wooden box. Grandmaster Tan Yin presented it with both hands and personally handed it to the old madam. Not to mention the guests, even the people of the Li clan were flabbergasted when they saw this scene. Grandmaster Tan Yin was a famous monk who usually meditated on Zen and Taoism. It was extremely difficult for ordinary people to meet him. Even the nobles of the royal family had to make an appointment in advance if they wanted to see him. In comparison, the small Li family was really not worth mentioning. But it was such a small Li family that Grandmaster Tan Yin came in person just to celebrate the old madam's birthday. Who dared to say that Grandmaster Tan Yin's handwritten sutra was a small gift? It was a small family. They might even treat it as a family heirloom. "Grandmaster, quickly take a seat." The old madam was also shocked and surprised. She did not dare to be negligent and personally led the old monk to the main seat. The old monk insisted on only sitting next to the old madam. Li Mingyuan tactfully sat at another table. The guests couldn't help glancing over. Except for the Empress Dowager's birthday, Grandmaster Tan Yin was invited. They had never heard of him celebrating anyone's birthday. What did the Li family do? Moreover, it seemed that the Grandmaster had great kindness to the Li family. Although Buddhism never participated in secular affairs, no one would ever look down on them because of this. When the news that Grandmaster Tan Yin had personally celebrated the old madam of the Li family's birthday spread out tomorrow, it would definitely cause a stir in the capital. After Grandmaster Tan Yin took his seat, Li Mingze immediately ordered the servants behind him, "Hurry up and change all the dishes on this table to vegetarian dishes." "There's no need." Grandmaster Tan Yin smiled and said, "Today is the old madam's birthday. This old monk will send a small gift and meet my young friend. I'll be leaving soon." "Young friend?" Li Mingze's expression froze. Everyone at the banquet had a puzzled look on their faces. The old monk stood up and gestured for the old madam to ignore him. He walked straight in a certain direction. How could the crowd really ignore him? They all looked in that direction. "Don't be impulsive. Now is not the time." Li Yi hugged Mississippi Lou's sword and refused to let go. If she ran to the old monk to learn martial arts now, the old madam's 60th birthday would be ruined. Young friend Li Yi, this old monk came uninvited. I hope you don't blame me. Under everyone's gaze, the old monk walked over slowly and said with a smile. The young novice monk, who was following behind the old monk, looked up and saw the beautiful woman in front of him. His face suddenly turned pale and a little panic appeared on his face. He hurriedly stood to the other side. I haven't seen you for a long time, master. You're still as elegant as ever. Li Yi thought about the scripture and said something carelessly. He thought to himself that this old monk was an eminent monk. Why didn't he have any calmness? Wasn't there still 2 days before the deadline to hand in the manuscript? The scripture hasn't been copied yet. There's no need to worry, master. I'll send someone to deliver it to the temple when the time comes. The old monk smiled and said, this matter is not urgent. This old monk just feels that young friend has a deep affinity with Buddhism. If there's a chance, it would be interesting to debate with you about Buddhism. Although the cold mountain temple is small, there will always be a place for you. Li Yi didn't know how deep his affinity with Buddhism was. He only knew that if this old monk wanted to debate with him about Buddhism, with the experience of countless predecessors for thousands of years, he would definitely be able to fool the old monk until his worldview collapsed and he started to doubt his life. He might even give up being a monk and there would be one less eminent monk in the world. This was a great sin. No matter how many pagodas he built, it would not be enough to repay the debt. It was better not to do such a sin. Buddhism can't be debated. In terms of Buddhism, master should find other eminent monks. Li Yi always felt that this old monk also wanted to trick him into becoming a monk. He was too bold. He dared to make Rui a living widow. Even if Rui didn't do it, Mississippi Lou would cut off his bald head and kick it like a ball. When Li Yi and the old monk were discussing whether he had a fate with Buddhism, he didn't realize that the atmosphere around them had become a little strange. Just now, he was still curious why Master Tan Yin would personally come to Madame Dowager's birthday with his identity. Now that he saw the master and the young man talking happily, how could he not understand that the two should have known each other for a long time? Madame Dowager celebrated her birthday every year. Why didn't he come even once? It was true that he came to celebrate Madame Dowager's birthday, but his main purpose was probably that young man. Didn't he see that the master just exchanged a few words with Madame Dowager and walked straight over there? He was probably the only person in the entire capital, or even the entire Jing kingdom, who could be called a little friend by Master Tan Yin. Who exactly was the eldest grandson of the Li family? First, he used the longevity painting to suppress Xiao Chen, and then he made Master Tan Yin lower himself to attend his birthday. Was this really the child of the Li family who had been living outside for 20 years? As the master of the Li family, Li Mingzhou was at a loss in the face of such a situation. If he neglected Master Tan Yin, it would be bad for the Li family's reputation. However, the master walked over on his own. Did he have to invite him back? At this moment, Madame Dowager said, "Go and invite and the master over." Master Tan Yin was of noble status. No matter what the master thought, as a member of the Li family, it was not good to neglect him. Looking at Li Mingzi getting up and walking over, Madame Fong lowered her head and clenched her fists tightly, gritting her teeth so hard that they were about to break. She originally wanted to borrow Zhao Chun's longevity painting to make him a joke at Madame Dowager's birthday banquet, but she did not expect that it would become a stepping stone for him to become famous. It turned out to be a clumsy move, causing more people to notice him. Monk Tan Yin's appearance pushed everyone's attention to him to a new peak. If this continued, even her stubborn husband would think that he was the most suitable candidate to be the next master of the Li family. Madame Fong's face was gloomy. The current master of the Li family was her husband, and the future master of the Li family would definitely be her son. No one could take him away. Not to mention Li Minggen's son, even if Li Minghan came back to life, he could forget about it. I appreciate Assistant Minister Li's kindness. I've already delivered the gift, so I won't stay any longer. I'll take my leave now. There's no need to send me off. The old monk left with the little monk. Under everyone's gaze, he was extremely high profile. He wasn't as quiet as when he came. Come with me. Monk Tan-yin left, but Li Mingzi did not intend to let Li Yi stay here any longer. He and Madame Dowager still had a lot of questions about Monk Tan-yin. Rui, come with me. Li Yi grabbed Miss Lu's arm and decided to take her with him. He didn't want her to keep staring at the direction of the old monk. He was afraid that once he turned around, she would chase after him with her sword and fight with the old monk for 300 rounds in the name of learning kung fu. Li Mingzi did not say anything about this. Madame Dowager liked Mississippi Lu very much. Madame Dowager would only be happy if she went with him. The little fatty looked at Li Yi enviously. Those sitting there were all his elders. If he sat there, he could be the first to eat. Originally, he wanted to sit in the corner peacefully, but after being disturbed by the old monk, and seeing the expressions on everyone's faces, Li Yi knew that he couldn't sit still even if he wanted to. Little Yi, what's going on between you and Master Tan-yin? Sure enough, as soon as he sat down, his aunt asked with a face full of gossip. Li Yi was depressed. This question was very unprofessional. What could happen between him and an old monk? He said helplessly, nothing much. Last time when I went to Cold Mountain Temple with Grandma, I happened to meet Master Tan-yin. We chatted for a while, but we're not very familiar. I don't know why he came to our house. It was not convenient to tell them about the scriptures, so Li Yi could only say so. Is that really the case? The beautiful woman's face was full of disbelief. Thinking back to the situation just now, the two of them could not have just chatted. Li Yi nodded and said, that's how masters are. They like to pay attention to fate. Master Tan-yin once said that I have fate with Buddhism. Maybe it's because of this. The beautiful woman frowned and said, what fate with Buddhism? Big brother only has one son, so we can't cut off the line. Even Master Tan-yin can't do that. You should go to the temple less in the future. Your second uncle will soon transfer you to the capital, and the family has already sent someone to pick up your wife. She's already 20 years old, and she doesn't even have a child. This matter has to be settled quickly. Hearing Li Yi's words, Madame Fang's heart moved. She looked up and said, you can't say that. To be able to have fate with Master Tan-yin is a blessing that can't be cultivated for several lifetimes. Nephew, you have to seize this opportunity. This is also beneficial to our Li family. Madame Fang looked like she was thinking of the Li family. In her heart, she hoped that Li Yi would stay in the temple and not come back. The Li family would not let a monk be the family head. What? Li Yi ignored Madame Fang's words. The family had sent someone to Qing and Prefecture to pick up Rui. When did this happen? How come he didn't know? If Rui came to the capital, what was the point of him going back? Was he going to live with Rui? Aunt Li Anrong looked at Li Yi and said reproachfully, look at you. As a granddaughter-in-law, how can I not come for the old madam's 60th birthday? By the time you think about it, it's already too late. The old madam has already sent someone to Qing and Prefecture. If it weren't for the rain that delayed the journey a few days ago, I'm afraid they would have arrived in the capital by now. Faced with his aunt's accusation, Li Yi was momentarily speechless. What should he say? This time, when he came to the capital, he had no intention of staying for long. He just wanted to replace the original owner of this body to come here and have a look. After that, he would go back and have children with Rui. Who would have thought that so many things would happen after he came here? His original plan was completely disrupted. Now that they had picked up Rui, his own plan, what other plan could there be? Chapter 344. Master Tan Yin's Dharma is profound. Even Empress Dowager praises him. You must not be disrespectful to him in the future. The old grandma warned Li Yi. A monk's behavior couldn't be judged by common sense. It was a blessing for the Li family that Master Tan Yin was willing to condescend to be friends with his son. He couldn't be arrogant because of this. Otherwise, he would be criticized by all his followers. Li Yi could only nod in agreement. The old grandma's words were a little late. She had already been disrespectful. Moreover, Master Tan Yin, who was profound in Dharma, wasn't really above the mortal world. He ate, drank, and pooped like ordinary people. He was just a little smarter and knew how to recite scriptures better than ordinary people. He also had desires. He hadn't finished copying the scriptures he had promised. The old monk wouldn't care about the issue of disrespect. After all, it was not a bad thing to be on good terms with Master Tan Yin. The guests were still present. The old grandma didn't continue to pester them on this matter. The necessary procedures had been completed. It was time to eat. Eat more. Look at how thin you are. The old grandma put food into Mississippi Lou's bowl for her. In the entire Li family, she was the only one who had such an honor. Except for Rui, the table was full of elders. The atmosphere was dull. It was better to sit with the little fatty. It was free and lively. She only took 2 mouthfuls of food on the plate in front of her. A steward of the Li family hurried over and whispered a few words in second Uncle Li Ming's ear. The Crown Prince of Prince Ning sent someone to congratulate the old grandma on her birthday. Li Mingze stood up from his seat, looking surprised. Cough. Li Yi almost spat out a mouthful of tea. He also choked. He turned around and coughed hard. What crown prince? The old grandma put down her chopsticks and asked. Li Mingze's face was full of confusion. He said, the crown prince of Prince Ning, the supervisor of Jiangyi province appointed by His Majesty a few days ago, he sent someone to congratulate you. The guests at the next table stopped what they were doing. Ning Wang was the younger brother of the current emperor and the most powerful Wang Yi in the Jing kingdom. His fief was only slightly inferior to the capital, Qing and Fu. It was enough to show how much importance the emperor placed on him. A few days ago, the crown prince of Ning Wang had married the daughter of the Wang family as his consort. The Wang family had been around for hundreds of years, and had gone through many dynasties to remain standing. They had a deep foundation and were one of the most powerful and wealthy families in the entire Jing country. With such a background, the crown prince had actually sent someone to celebrate the birthday of the old woman of the Li family. Could it be that the Li family and Ning Wang Fu also had relations? Everyone had their own guesses, but they didn't know that the head of the Li family, Li Mingze, was also full of doubts. He didn't dare to delay and personally went out to welcome them. A few black lines appeared on Li Yi's forehead. What was this fellow Li Xian trying to do? Did he think that this old man's birthday wasn't big enough? The only good thing was that he didn't come in person. Otherwise, he didn't know how many more interrogations he would have to face after the birthday. The crown prince's mansion sent a steward, which could be considered as giving enough face to the Li family. Many people were wondering who he was and why Li Mingze had to personally welcome him. Just when the steward's attitude was obviously respectful, news came from the other side. It's the crown prince of Prince Ning. How could the Li family, although the crown prince of Prince Ning had not been in the public sight for long, the things related to him had left a deep impression on everyone. He married the daughter of the Wang family, was appointed as the supervisor of Jiangyi province, and accused Qin Yu of favoritism, causing him to be banished to another province. Next, the crown prince's mansion sent someone to celebrate the old lady's birthday. They thought they knew the Li family very well, but today they realized that the Leaf family seemed to be far more mysterious than they showed. The guests from the Crown Prince's mansion hadn't sat down yet when the Leaf family's steward walked over in a daze. He looked at Li Mingze with a stupefied expression. Head of the family, Princess Yongle, the people from the princess's mansion, bang. Li Mingze was shocked, and countless chopsticks around him fell to the ground. Princess Yongle, the only daughter of the emperor and the queen, the eldest princess of the Jing kingdom, had been doted on since she was a child. She was the only princess who didn't get married after she came of age and stayed in the palace. She was a real member of the royal family. Was this still the Leaf family that they knew was declining? Even when the Leaf family was at its peak, it didn't have such a great reputation. Li Yi put down his chopsticks and covered his face with his hands. Finally, he figured out what the strange smiles on their faces meant when they parted. Li Yi had mixed feelings. The princess said she had a way to solve the problem the Leaf family was facing. She promised that after Li Yi left, no one would dare to make trouble for the Leaf family. Was this the way? The Leaf family's trouble was much smaller. The crown prince and the princess sent gifts on the birthday of the old Leaf family, which was a very obvious signal for outsiders. The Leaf family was protected by the crown prince and the princess. Whoever wanted to make trouble for the Leaf family had to think about whether they could afford to offend such a powerful force at the same time. After the birthday banquet, the task of explaining to the whole family fell on him. The people from the Crown Prince's mansion and the Princess's mansion came together. Even the old grandma couldn't sit still. When did the Leaf family have a relationship with them? Not only the guests were curious, but even the old grandma was very curious. This shocked them even more than Master Tan Yin. You too, I wonder if the Crown Prince and the Princess. The two people from the Crown Prince's mansion and the Princess's mansion obviously had an appointment. Li Mingze looked at them, but he was interrupted by the young man from the princess's mansion before he could finish his words. We're just following orders. The two princes have told us not to disturb the old grandma's birthday banquet. Assistant Minister Li and the old grandma don't need to mind us. The confusion and surprise in Li Mingze's heart were about to reach the peak. Master Tan Yin, the crown prince of Prince Ning, and Princess Yongle, these three people had no connection with the Li family, but they all appeared tonight. What's more, they acted in unison. They only sent gifts and told him not to mind. How could he not mind? Among these people, which one of them could be offended by the Li family? Li, can I have a word with you? Just when Li Mingze was at a loss, he saw the man from the princess's mansion step forward and speak to a young man behind the crowd. Li Mingze looked back at Li Yi, then at the two people in front of him. After a short moment of surprise, a trace of understanding suddenly appeared on his face. Second uncle, grandma, I'm leaving for a while, Li Yi said awkwardly and walked towards a secluded corner. The steward of the crown prince's mansion and the man from the princess's mansion all followed. There are still many things we don't know about him. The old grandma murmured as she watched the three people leave. Seeing this scene, everything that happened tonight could be explained. Master Tan Yin, the crown prince of Prince Ning, and Princess Yongle, these people clearly had no connection with the Li family. Why did they appear at her birthday banquet? She knew too little about this grandson whom she had met for the first time in 20 years. Chapter 345. After experiencing so many things, at this moment, what the guests were thinking about had nothing to do with the birthday banquet. They didn't expect the Li family to be so secretive. They didn't know when they had the support of the royal family. That eldest grandson who had left home for 20 years seemed to have a good relationship with the crown prince and even the princess. What happened that year? Was it really just the eldest son of the Li family eloping with someone else? Were there other secrets? After tonight, what would the Qin family, who had a grudge against the Li family, do? Was the Li family behind the banishment of the capital's magistrate, Qin Yu? What happened tonight was too shocking and far exceeded their expectations. The guests were brainstorming. The face of the master's wife, Madame Fong, had turned from gloomy to pale. Her nephew, who had no background, suddenly had the support of the crown prince and the princess. She had originally looked down on them, but now she had to look up to them. The psychological difference was so great that it was like falling from heaven to hell. Even if she had the support of her maiden family, she still felt a deep sense of helplessness. When Madame Fong was in a trance and sat on her seat with lifeless eyes, the guard of the princess's residence looked at Li Yi with a smile and asked, "The princess asked me to ask Li, is the gift from the princess's residence to Li's satisfaction?" Li Yi had to admit that although Li Xian and Mingzhu's actions would bring him some trouble, it was the most suitable method. Ever since he saw the Qin family's daughter that day, Li Yi knew that there was no turning back for the Qin family and the Li family. He could return to Qing and Prefecture and the Li family's hands would not be able to reach there. However, the Li family in the capital would have to face the House of Dukes' revenge. The difference in power between the two families was too great. The Li family would not be the last one to persevere. A crown prince and a princess should be enough to make the Qin family afraid. The bigger the family, the more scruples they had. They would not offend someone they could not afford to offend just for this matter. Now that his worries had been resolved, Li Yi looked at the man and asked, "What else did the princess say?" The man smiled and said, "The princess also said that it is impossible to fulfill all the rewards that Li wants, but a discount is still possible." Discount? Li Yi was puzzled. "What do you mean?" "This. Her Highness didn't say." The man shook his head and said, "His Highness only said these two sentences. As for the rest, Li will ask His Highness next time." While he was pondering over what Mingzhu meant, there was a sudden commotion in front of him. In the next moment, most of the guests stood up. Li Yi's eyebrows twitched. "No way, again." He counted with his fingers. Other than the old monk, Li Xian, and Mingzhu, he really didn't know anyone else in the capital. Since there was such a big commotion in front of him, could it be that the Qin family came to make trouble? Unless the Qin family was crazy, the dignified state duke wouldn't do such a shameful thing. Thousands of thoughts went through Li Yi's mind. When he heard that sharp and thin voice, which was neither yin nor yang, "Where is Li Yi? Come out quickly to receive the imperial edict." His face suddenly turned pale. "It's over, everything is over. One should not be afraid of thieves stealing, but one should be afraid of thieves remembering." Being remembered by the king of a country was not a good thing. Li Yi sat down on the chair and had the urge to let Rui take him away from this place. Without anyone's order, everyone immediately stood up from their seats and stood on both sides to form a passage. At the end of the passage was where Li Yi was. Two eunuchs walked along the passage with their heads held high and said in a sharp voice, "County Lieutenant Li, receive the imperial edict." Li Yi raised his head and saw the two familiar eunuchs again. "What are you waiting for? Kneel down and receive the imperial edict." Li Mingzhu walked over quickly and urged. The situation was not in his favor. Li Yi could only bend his knees helplessly. Everyone present, including second uncle Li Mingzhu and the old madam, knelt down with a crash. The little fatty didn't understand. He raised his head and looked around, but was quickly pressed down by his mother. The imperial edict states, Anxi County Lieutenant Li Yi improved interrogation by torture, created horseshoes, invented cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and stitched up wounds. He blessed the common people and blessed the people. He offered a divine object from heaven's punishment, defeated the Qi army, and expanded the territory. The emperor conferred upon you the title of Prince of Chang'an. You will be crowned with honor and forever blessed by the heavens. Note, this Chang'an is not Chang'an. I really can't think of a better name. The eunuch said a lot of tongue-twisting words. Li Yi could only understand the first and the last few sentences. The gist of it was that he had done so many things before and all the credit had been accumulated by him. This time, he would be rewarded together. He would no longer be the Anxi County lieutenant and no longer return to the Qing and prefecture. The emperor had given him a piece of land in Chang'an. From then on, Li Yi would stay there and be a small county magistrate. From then on, he would truly enter the ranks of the nobles. Chang'an and the capital were neighbors. Maybe Li Yi could see the city walls from his fief. The change from a duke to a county magistrate was not mentioned. He didn't mention tens of thousands of gold coins or thousands of hectares of fertile land. This discount was a bit too much. At this moment, Li Yi's mood calmed down. It seemed that the emperor also knew that he wasn't cut out to be an official. He just wanted him to be a parasite in society. In fact, he had long known that this day would come. He had always been unwilling to face it. This time, he might not be able to avoid it. The eunuch squeezed a smile on his face and said, "County magistrately, accept the imperial edict." Seeing that Li Yi didn't respond, Li Mingzi suppressed the shock in his heart. He pulled his sleeve and said in a low voice, "Don't just stand there. Accept the imperial edict." The eunuch handed the imperial edict to Li Yi respectfully and said, "His Majesty has spoken. County Magistrate Li is summoned to the palace tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, someone from the palace will be sent to pick you up." The eunuch came and went quickly. He left the Li family directly, leaving behind his nobility robe and other belongings. He also messed up Madame Dowager's birthday banquet. Now, no one cared about Madame Dowager's birthday. The eldest grandson of the Li family had been conferred nobility by His Majesty. He was the county magistrate of Chang'an. The head of the Li family, Li Mingzi, was also just a county magistrate. In the Jing kingdom, nobility could not be conferred without military merits. It was the first time that His Majesty had made an exception to confer nobility. What kind of luck did the Li family have? After so many years of decline, was it finally going to rise again? Everyone had heard the description in the imperial edict. They were very unfamiliar with the description. However, His Majesty was generous in praising Li Mingzi's contribution. Naturally, this matter couldn't be false. Congratulations, congratulations, one family with two nobles. Congratulations, Madame Dowager, congratulations, Assistant Minister Li. County Magistrate Li has been favored by His Majesty at such a young age. His future is limitless. When they calmed down, everyone came forward to congratulate them. Madame Dowager's smile was unprecedentedly bright. Although Li Mingzi was still shocked, he couldn't hide the smile on his face. County Magistrate Li of Chang'an, County Magistrate Li of Chang'an. Madame Fang, who was sitting in a seat behind everyone, murmured to herself with a pale face. Chapter 346. First, it was the highly respected Buddhist master. Then, it was the Crown Prince of Ning with a powerful background. Next, it was the noble princess of a country. Finally, even the emperor's imperial edict arrived. The eldest grandson of the Li family, who had just been appointed as the county magistrate of Chang, and by the emperor, instantly became the center of attention. No one cared about the 60th birthday anymore. Li Yi felt guilty about this, but the old woman didn't care at all. In fact, she was even happier than before. It was as if this matter was more important than her 60th birthday. This was not surprising. After the founding of the country, although the country had been in turmoil for decades, it was generally stable. It was almost impossible to rely on military merits to earn a title of nobility. At most, they would be rewarded with land. The emperor had been on the throne for more than 10 years and had intentionally reduced the number of titles. There were very few people who were awarded titles. It was the first time in recent years that someone was awarded the title of Viscount in Jing County. The meaning behind this was self-evident. For the sake of the continuation of the Li family, the old woman couldn't give him more. She couldn't help but feel guilty. Looking at it now, how could what the Li family could give him compare to the emperor's favor? What could be better than receiving the emperor's favor? After making such a big scene at the old woman's birthday banquet, Li Yi was naturally drowned in all kinds of questions. Of course, this included what happened between him, the crown prince, and the princess. The imperial edict talked about all the contributions, and what exactly did they mean? Li Yi had only briefly explained how he had met the crown prince and the princess in Qing and Fu and the few things he had unintentionally done. He had not expected them to be so useful to the country. As for chatting with the emperor in the garden and pulling him back from the gates of hell, for their sake, Li Yi did not mention a word about it. Li Mingze and the others only knew that Li Yi's position as county lieutenant was personally conferred by His Majesty, but they did not delve into it. The current His Majesty cherished talents, and because of one article, many poorer students were granted special permission to enter officialdom. They only thought of this as one of the many. However, with the arrival of the imperial edict, everyone finally understood how much importance the emperor placed on him. He was only a 20-year-old viscount. No one knew how far he would go in the future. The Li family was still too small for him. Li Mingze thought for a moment and looked at Li Yi. I was hesitating before whether I should leave the position of master to you in the future. Now, it seems that for the sake of the Li family, it is indeed the most suitable for you to be the master of the family. Madame Fang's expression changed when she heard this, but she only lowered her head and didn't speak. Things were different now. Even if her husband gave up the position of the Li family head to a county magistrate who was not even 20 years old, no one in the Li family would object. Old Madame's expression did not change. She looked at Li Yi as well, obviously supporting her son's decision. At the same table, the core figures of the Li family weren't surprised by the words of the master. If a family wanted to survive and maintain its prosperity, it needed the unremitting efforts of the master of each generation. Although Li Minghan was the eldest son, he wouldn't be a good master. It could be seen from the fact that he eloped with an ordinary girl without caring about the family. If it weren't for the painstaking efforts of the current master, the Li family would have declined a long time ago, far worse than it was now. The younger generation of the Li family, including the son of the master, didn't have any outstanding figures. They didn't have the ability to lead the Li family to glory again, and they didn't even have the ability to maintain the status quo. At this time, handing the future of the Li family to Li Yi, who was favored by the emperor and had a close relationship with the royal family, was obviously the best choice. Moreover, he was the eldest grandson of the Li family. Everything was justified. Neither outsiders nor members of the Li family had the right to criticize him. Lu Rui looked at the crowd and then at Li Yi. Seeing that the atmosphere was unusually quiet, he pulled back his chopsticks. Being stared at by everyone, Li Yi suddenly smiled and said, "Second uncle, I was born in Qing and Fu and grew up in Qing and Fu. Actually, before coming to the capital, I only wanted to wait for grandmother's birthday and then immediately return. I never thought about becoming the head of the Li family. If it weren't for the emperor's imperial edict, I would have left in 2 days at most." Madame Fang heard this and raised her head slightly. Disbelief flashed through her eyes. Li Mingze still wanted to say something, but Li Yi said again, "I am the same as my father. We are not suited to be the master. If the Li family falls into my hands, I'm afraid it will decline even faster. Second uncle is in the prime of his life. Under your management, the Li family will not decline. As for the future, that should be the matter of Yingjia and Yingkai." Li Yi wasn't being modest. He liked to live a simple life of daily necessities. With Rui, and Xiao Huan, anywhere was home. He was confident that he could live such a life well. As for being the master of a large family, he had to rack his brains and sweat for the rise and fall of the family every day. He would probably die of old age in less than 2 years. What meaning was there in such a life? It was even scarier than the mutual deception in the officialdom. To be able to manage the Li family to this extent under the pressure of Duke Chen's Fu, this second uncle of his was the most suitable person to do this. For the sake of the Li family, and for his own sake, Li Yi felt that he needed to say these words first. Madame Fong raised her head and stared dazedly at Li Yi. The shock in her eyes deepened. He had never thought about being the master of the Li family. He had never thought about taking away everything that should have belonged to him from them. If that was the case, then all the things she had done, in his eyes, were actually many jokes. The title of nobility, the emperor's favor, the friendship with the heir, the princess, and even great master Tan Yin. These things were far more important than the Li family. He could easily obtain them. It was a pity that she still deeply thought that he had designs on the Li family. After completely letting out a sigh of relief in her heart, Madame Fong lowered her head again. Her face was completely red. She wished that there was a hole in the ground to crawl into. Li Mingze frowned slightly. Li Yi's words were very firm. Not only would he not be the master now, he would not be in the future. Heroes and talents were all mediocre. After his 100 years, the Li family's decline was already inevitable. Unless, in his lifetime, he could bring the Li family to another level. However, this matter was almost impossible in his hands. A viscount in name was far inferior to the county of Shi that the emperor had personally conferred. If his title of nobility could be raised again, the status of the Li family would also rise. However, the premise of all this was that he was willing to become the master of the Li family. Looking at Li Yi's smiling face and his unusually firm attitude, Li Mingze didn't say anything more. This matter needed to be considered at length. Chapter 347. You haven't learned anything else, but you've completely learned your father's lazy personality. The old mistress looked at him and smiled. Forget it. Your second uncle can still stay in this position for a few more decades. It's fine if you don't want it. But don't forget, no matter what, this is your home. Looking at the old mistress's loving smile, Li Yi felt warmth in his heart. Although he lacked the passionate affection for the Li family, the old mistress and the others treated him like family. He couldn't become the head of the Li family, but he wouldn't sit back and watch the Li family decline. No matter how grand a banquet was, it would come to an end. Late at night, the guests gradually dispersed. Li Yi sat alone in the corridor, staring at the sky in a daze. Regarding all of this, he was more or less mentally prepared. Luckily, Rui and Xiao Huan were almost here. As long as they were here, for him, whether he was in Qing and Fu or Jing City, it didn't make much of a difference. Living a carefree life was something people yearned for. No one had ever realized it. Although it was annoying to be remembered by the princess and the emperor, it wasn't without its benefits. In the past, even if he sold candied haws or bottles of Rui nectar on the street, there would be people looking for trouble. Now that he had the title of county lieutenant or county magistrate, at least he could sell candied haws and Rui nectar with peace of mind. The only difference was that the location had changed from Qing and prefecture to the capital. Unfortunately, there was still more than half a year left on the lease for Rui Workshop. If the whole family moved here, wouldn't the money be wasted? Other than that, there was also the theater that had been opened all over Qing and prefecture. The assets that he had spent half a year building were all in Qing and prefecture. Now, he had to start all over again in the capital. With the title of nobility and a large mansion, there would definitely be no lack of maids and servants. At the very least, he should hire a few guards. Li Yi felt as if he could see money being spent like water. It wasn't easy to feed so many people with the salary given by the court. Money. It had been a long time since he had a lack of money. Are we not going back? Mississippi Lou sat on the wall, swinging her legs and looking up at the sky as well. Who said that? It's just a house in the capital. You can go back whenever you want and stay as long as you want. The magistrate was not a hostage or a criminal. His personal freedom was not restricted. As long as he didn't hide in Qing and Fu and not return to the capital, there shouldn't be any problems. After we move in, I want to pick a courtyard first. After a long time, Mississippi Lou's voice came again. No problem, you can choose first. Li Yi stood up and walked to the wall. He raised his head and said, however, in return, shouldn't you repay me a little? For example, Mississippi Lou bent her legs and narrowed her beautiful eyes. She held the hilt of her sword and looked down at him. Like what? For example, I don't have to pay you back the 50 taels of silver I owe you. Li Yi looked at her and said. It's 100 taels, Mississippi Lou reminded. You agree? I disagree. Then there's nothing to talk about. As usual. Mississippi Lou jumped down from the wall and threw the sword in her hand to him. Make your move. Mississippi Lou was a very principled person. As long as Li Yi could defeat her, she would never say no to Li Yi's decision. Unfortunately, they had used this method many times and Li Yi had never won even once. The next morning, a servant from the Li family came to inform him that someone from the palace had arrived. Yesterday, the eunuch who delivered the imperial edict said that he had to enter the palace this morning, but he didn't expect it to be this early. Li Yi put on the nobility robe with sleepy eyes. It fit him perfectly and looked better than the county officer's robe. The materials seemed to be more exquisite as well. He left the Li family surrounded by the old mistress and the others. Until now, Li Yi knew nothing other than that he had been given the title of a county officer and that his fief was not far from the capital, Enchanting district. He had slept late last night after fighting with Mississippi Lou, so he was woken up early in the morning. He sat in the palanquin drowsily. The old emperor was quite considerate and had laid out a comfortable bed in the palanquin. The only problem was that the space was a little small and he had to curl up his legs to lie down. But at least there was a place to sleep. Not long after, Li Yi went back to sleep. The palanquin rocked rhythmically and comfortably. The swaying of the sedan chair was rhythmic and comfortable. In a daze, Li Yi only remembered that after he entered the palace, the old emperor had entrusted him with an important task and rewarded him with a lot of things. The silver was piled up like a mountain, and he was rewarded with 10 beautiful maids. In his excitement, Li Yi did his best to assist the emperor in governing the Jing kingdom, eliminating internal and external troubles, and quelling rebellions. He single-handedly facilitated the Jing kingdom to go through 2 industrial revolutions. The strength of the country was unprecedentedly strong, and its prestige subdued the 4 barbarians, allowing the Jing kingdom to complete an unprecedented unification. Later, before Emperor Jing died, he was conferred the title of prince with a different surname. There seemed to be something wrong. He was second only to the emperor and above tens of thousands of people, and then he woke up. He impatiently slapped away the eunuch's hand that was shaking his shoulder, wiped off his saliva, and walked out of the palanquin. He immediately felt refreshed and had a good sleep. County Magistrate Li, we're here. The eunuch's smile was very kind. Li Yi looked around and found that he was in a rather spacious courtyard. There was a row of rooms opposite him and people were coming in and out frequently. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't look like the place where the emperor lived. Where is this? Li Yi looked back at the eunuch and asked. Did he come to the wrong place? Food Distribution Bureau, the eunuch replied. Food Distribution Bureau. Li Yi looked at the clothes of the people coming in and out and immediately understood that this should be a place similar to the imperial kitchen. The smell coming out of the room was quite fragrant. Not bad, the old emperor actually knew how to be humane. He knew that Li Yi hadn't had breakfast and specially asked someone to bring him to the imperial kitchen to fill his stomach. In an instant, the emperor's good impression in Li Yi's heart went up a level. "Well, what kind of breakfast do you provide here?" Li Yi asked a random servant. It was not easy to come to the imperial palace. The imperial chefs in the imperial palace should be almost the world's top chefs. The food they made would definitely taste good. He wanted to take this opportunity to have a good look. He just didn't know if he could take it away and let Rui and the little fatty try it when he got back. The servant who was stopped by Li Yi looked dull and didn't know how to answer. He also didn't dare to speak carelessly because he couldn't afford to offend a person wearing such clothes. Ahem, county magistrately, you didn't come here to eat," the eunuch said after coughing twice. "Why did you bring me here if not to eat?" Li Yi frowned and asked. You're here. Hurry up and make me hot pot." A bouncing figure came in from outside. When she saw Li Yi, her eyes immediately turned into a crescent moon. "Greetings, princess." When the little girl walked over, a large number of people immediately knelt down. Li Yi was now a nobleman, so he didn't need to kneel when he saw the princess. He resisted the urge to pinch her face and said, "If you want to eat hot pot, go to your brother Xian's place. I still have business to attend to." "I won't." Princess Shanning's little face turned and said, "My royal sister and brother Xian said that your hot pot is better." County magistrately, the eunuch looked at Li Yi with a smile and said, "Your business is to cook for the princess. This is His Majesty's order." Li Yi's expression froze when he heard that. He asked him to get up early in the morning just to make hot pot for this little girl. What exactly was the old emperor thinking? Was a viscount supposed to cook for the royal family? In ancient times, King Yu of Zhou used beacons to make fun of the feudal vassals for a smile, which led to the destruction of the country. Today, Emperor Jing summoned the county magistrate of Chang and to the palace just for a hot pot. Such a fatuous emperor was like a second King Yu of Zhou. The Jing kingdom would be destroyed sooner or later. Chapter 348. I'm going to listen to the teacher's lecture. I'll be back in 2 hours. Don't be lazy. I want the hot pot to be ready when I come back. After Princess Shanning finished speaking, she ran out in a hurry. Several eunuchs and palace maids chased after her with pale faces. Li Yi sat on a stone bench in the courtyard with a gloomy expression on his face. Anyone who was disturbed from a good dream would not be in a good mood to come here early in the morning just to cook. The eunuch reminded him, "County magistrately, this is the order of His Majesty. You can't neglect the princess." All right. I got it. You can go and do your own things." Li Yi waved his hand impatiently and said. It was still early. He had 2 hours to find a place to catch up on sleep. As for cooking, he could do it in an hour. "It's my duty to follow county magistrately," the eunuch said with a smile. The eunuch's voice was sharp and thin. It was neither a man nor a woman. It was quite uncomfortable to listen to it. His smile was gloomy. No wonder most of the eunuchs in literary works were not good people. With such good qualities, it would be a pity if he did not become a bad person. Then take me out for a walk. Li Yi did not plan to catch up on sleep. He had fallen asleep in the sedan and did not have the chance to see what the palace looked like. If he did not take a day trip to the palace, he would feel sorry for waking up so early. The eunuch said with a fake smile, "I'm sorry, county magistrately. You can't go anywhere except here." The palace was not a vegetable market where anyone could stroll around. Without an identity card, he would be caught by the guards within 2 steps. Well, he was disturbed from a good dream. Now he had no freedom and his stomach was empty. Perhaps the old emperor did not think of feeding him. His impression in Li Yi's heart suddenly became negative. He got up from the stone bench and strode into a room with a fragrant smell. The eunuch did not follow him in. He knew that the county magistrate was already very dissatisfied with him. He did not dare to get into trouble again. He had been in the palace for more than a decade, but this was the first time he had seen His Majesty order a viscount around as a cook. Thunder, rain, and dew were all grace from the heavens. Why didn't His Majesty find someone else, but chose this newly appointed county magistrate? This wasn't a punishment, but a grace. Li Yi didn't think that being a cook for others was a grace. He was willing to cook for his own family. If being forced to cook was considered a grace, then who would want such a lousy grace? Finding something to fill his stomach was what he should be doing right now. On the table in the middle of the room, there were many bowls and plates, and the rich aroma was coming from there. "Sir, you can't touch the things here. You can't touch them." Just as Li Yi was about to open one to take a look, a chubby man ran over and said while huffing and puffing, "Who are you?" Li Yi glanced at him and asked, "Lord Ju, this lowly official is still in charge of the food bureau." The man smiled apologetically. The head chef of the food bureau was also the head chef of the royal restaurant. No wonder he was so fat. It seemed that he had made a lot of money over the years. "Lord Ju, you can't touch this. This is the osmanthus cake that Consort Yen wants." Speaking of osmanthus cake, Li Yi felt his mouth salivate. It had been a long time since he had eaten the osmanthus cake that Ruoqing made. He missed it very much. Seeing this Lord Ju's hand reach down, the head chef's heart couldn't help but jump. He said, "Lord Ju, you can't touch it. You can't touch this either. This is for Consort Yen and will be sent over immediately." The head chef's face was covered in a cold sweat. If he delayed Consort Yen's time, he wouldn't be able to withstand being chopped off even if he had 10 heads. Consort Yen couldn't be offended, and neither could Consort Yen. Li Yi was annoyed. He looked at the head chef and asked, "What do you have here that Consort Yen doesn't want? Quickly bring it over for me." The head chef smiled bitterly and said, "No." The food bureau was in charge of the meals in the palace. Only those consorts, princesses, and princes could enjoy this privilege. He was only a head chef. Without His Majesty's edict, how could he dare to let people eat here? The higher-ups only said that Princess Shanning's meals were taken over by someone else. They were allowed to do as they pleased here, but no one told them how. He was only a small head chef. He couldn't afford to offend either side. How could he live like this? Seeing that this Lord Ju was reaching for the next one, the head chef hurriedly said, "This is Princess Yongla's soup." "Lord Ju, you mustn't." "Princess Yongla's." Li Yi was startled. He finally met someone he could afford to offend. He straightforwardly opened the lid and used a spoon to taste it. He nodded in satisfaction and said, "The taste isn't bad. I'll take this. You can make another portion for the princess." Plop. The head chef's legs softened and he fell to the ground. This kind of soup would take at least 4 hours. How could he make it in time to make it now? Seeing that the head chef was frightened, Li Yi comforted him, "Don't worry. I'll talk to Her Highness. It's none of your business." As expected of an imperial chef. His skill in cooking soup was probably on par with Li Yi's. Li Yi was hungry to begin with. Soon, a small bowl of soup was down his stomach. "Head Chef Han, is the princess's white fungus and lotus seed soup ready?" A clear voice sounded. A maid dressed in palace attire walked in from outside. "Yes." Li Yi wiped his mouth and replied. He pointed to the soup that was still more than half left. You. The maid saw a small bowl and spoon with traces left. She suddenly widened her eyes and said angrily, "How dare you?" The little maid gritted her teeth so hard that they were about to break. Her Highness had the habit of drinking a bowl of white fungus and lotus seed soup after practice every morning. This guy who came out of nowhere was really bold. He even dared to steal the princess's soup. "It's just a bowl of soup. Do you have to do that? Your princess used to freeload from me many times. Just take it as returning the favor of that bowl of egg-fried rice," Li Yi said indifferently. When they were in Qing and Prefecture, a prince, a princess, and 2 members of the royal family, they had always been frequent customers of Rui Lane. Not only did they not care about the business, but they were always treated with good wine and delicious food. They would wipe their mouths and leave after eating. Her Highness was not so stingy as to drink a bowl of lotus seed soup from her. You wait for me." The maid glared at Li Yi fiercely and left angrily. The head chef got up from the ground, patted the dust off his body, and was ready to do his own business. He could see that this was a matter between this lord and Her Highness. As a small head chef, it was better for him not to intervene. Ignoring the little maid who ran out, Li Yi picked up the spoon and filled a bowl for himself. Although the white fungus and lotus seed soup was delicious, the bowl in the palace was too small. After one bowl, it couldn't even fill the bottom. Chapter 349. Clang! Gold and iron collided with each other and sparks flew everywhere. The gray-haired old woman retreated a few steps. After stabilizing her body, she looked at the figure in front of her and said with a smile, "I'm getting old. It seems that I can no longer accompany the princess in the future." Mingzu sheathed her sword and shook her head. "Nanny, you don't have to go easy on me." The old woman shook her head with a smile and said, "Her Highness is talented and diligent in practicing. You are advancing at a rapid pace. This old woman is really no match for you." The old woman looked at the tall and obviously grown-up girl in front of her and couldn't help but sigh. 10 years had passed in a flash. The little princess who could only grit her teeth and use non-standard moves was now able to stand on her own. Even the old woman was no match for her. Princess, the white fungus and lotus seed soup has been stolen." The little palace maid ran all the way and said while panting. "Slow down, what happened?" Mingzu walked over and said softly. Just now I went to the food bureau to get the white fungus and lotus seed soup, but when I got there, the soup had already been drunk." The little palace maid covered her chest and said angrily. "Who did it?" The old woman came over and asked. It was not uncommon for the imperial harem to fight and scheme against each other, but it had never involved the princess. This was the first time such a thing had happened. The little palace maid shook her head and said, "I don't know his identity, but he said that it was the princess's way of returning the favor for the bowl of egg-fried rice." Egg-fried rice? Mingzu was stunned for a moment, then she smiled and said, "Okay, I got it. You can go now." The little palace maid nodded and watched the princess go out of the hall. When she walked towards the direction of the food bureau, a smile appeared on her face. That rude guy will definitely taste the bitterness. So bitter. After biting a lotus seed, Li Yi frowned. The chefs in the imperial palace were also careless. It was obvious that he forgot to remove the core of the lotus seed he just swallowed. "Why are you here?" A voice came from behind. Li Yi turned around, raised the bowl in his hand and gestured to her. "Do you want a bowl?" "It's my treat." The eunuchs in the courtyard immediately hid far away. They seemed to understand why His Majesty treated Li Xianzi differently. There were many viscounts in the capital, but he was the only one who dared to speak to the princess like this. I only found out about Father's decision yesterday. I was going to tell you in advance, but Father sent someone to pass the decree last night. Thinking about it, it doesn't make much difference. Mingsu looked at him and said, I will talk to Imperial Father about the Shangshi Bureau. Don't take Shanning's nonsense to heart. Forget it. Li Yi waved his hand. In fact, he felt more relaxed this way. Cooking a few dishes and making a hot pot were much better than doing other errands. Compared with the 3 provinces and 6 ministries, or the front line of the army, Li Yi felt that this place was more suitable for him. At least, the soup of the Shangshi Bureau was better. Li Mingzhu looked at the way he was concentrating on drinking the soup and her heart was slightly at ease. She had originally thought that he would be dissatisfied with being forced to stay in Jing by her imperial father, but now it seemed that he didn't seem to have any resistance towards it. For some reason, after drinking 2 bowls of soup, not only did he not feel full, he felt even hungrier. I'm going to make some egg fried rice. Do you want some? Li Yi got up and patted his butt. He looked at Mingzhu and asked. Her Highness nodded and expressed her approval of Li Yi's proposal. She hadn't eaten egg fried rice for a long time. The steward of the food bureau watched in amazement as this lord used white rice and eggs to quickly make 2 plates of fragrant food. He was eating with Her Royal Highness outside and began to worry about his position as the steward of the food bureau. It's a pity that there's no wine. Eating the egg fried rice, Her Highness looked a little regretful. Since ancient times, Li Yi had only known one person who ate egg fried rice with wine. There's no wine in the palace? Li Yi asked. Then he realized that she was talking about the liquor from Rui Distillery. There might be no shortage of good wine in the palace, but based on the current technology, it couldn't reach the level of distillation and purification. Speaking of liquor, Li Yi realized that in today's world, the only liquor production workshop was in Qing and Prefecture. Although there were other places, they were all from Qing and Prefecture. Naturally, the price was much higher. The capital was obviously an undeveloped treasure land. If a few liquor workshops could be opened here, it would undoubtedly be building a home on a golden mountain. Moreover, the distance between the capital and Qing and Prefecture was so far that it wouldn't affect each other's business. Not only that, Rui Du, perfume, and soap could all be used as a way to make a fortune. There were many more local tycoons in the capital than in Qing and Prefecture. How could they be afraid of not being able to support a family? To do business in this kind of place, the first thing to do was not to open a shop or build a workshop, but to curry favor. The capital was not like Qing and Prefecture. There were nobles everywhere. A small viscount was nothing. There were at least 80 if not 100 in the capital. If one of them became jealous, Li Yi wouldn't be able to handle it. Li Yi looked at his thighs, looked at Her Highness and said, how about we partner up to do the liquor business in the capital? At that time, you can drink whenever you want and as much as you want. Regarding Li Yi's proposal, Her Highness didn't think for long before agreeing. First, it was because she did like that kind of liquor, but it could only be bought in Qing and Prefecture. It was very rare in the capital. Second, she also knew that this business was very profitable. Even she couldn't ignore it. However, the capital was deep. It was impossible for Li Yi to make it big on his own. If he could establish a relationship with the royal family, he could avoid this worry. Whether it was for business or personal reasons, she couldn't refuse this favor. What do you need? Just tell me. Having eaten and drunk her fill, Her Highness lightly left these words before leaving. Li Yi liked her straightforward attitude. She didn't say anything unnecessary. She didn't even talk about the distribution of profits. She was definitely someone he could trust in for a long-term partnership. As for the specifics of the partnership, it wasn't urgent. He would wait until Rui and Xiao Huan arrived and they had completely settled down. Speaking of which, the emperor had only given him a noble's robe and a token to prove his identity. Fiefdom, maids, servants, and a large mansion, weren't these all standard requirements? Why hadn't he mentioned them? Hey, little princess, why are you here? Where are the palace maids? Interrupted by the manager's words, Li Yi turned his head and saw a girl about 6 or 7 years old standing in the courtyard. She was dressed in palace attire. The little girl's attire was clearly not ordinary. She held a doll in her arms. It had a baby face and a blank expression. Her eyes were big, clear, and bright, but there was no spirit in them. She didn't speak and stared straight into the room. Little princess, it's not time to eat yet. If you want to eat anything, just let me know. I'll send someone to bring it to you. The emperor was very strict with these little princesses and princes. There was even a fixed time for meals. The manager didn't dare to break the rules. Hearing the manager's words, the little girl didn't say a word. She turned and walked out with the doll in her arms. Chapter 350. Li Yi pointed at the little girl's back and turned to look at the steward of the food bureau. Which princess is this? He only knew 2 of the old emperor's princesses, the beautiful constable princess Yongla and the arrogant princess Shaning. He didn't know any of the princes. The little girl who looked a little silly just now was actually a princess. Lord Ju, that is Princess Yongning. The steward immediately replied. Li Yi realized that there was a huge gap between princesses. For example, Shou Yang, the Tsundra Lolita, might be the most pampered type. In order to satisfy her desire to eat hot pot, the old emperor did not hesitate to let a viscount enter the palace to be the chef. As for the lonely Princess Yongning, she might be the least pampered type. Li Yi turned his head and saw the corner of a robe peeking out from the stone steps at the entrance. Li Yi walked out slowly and saw the little girl sitting by the stone steps, hugging the doll in her arms. She was motionless and looked ahead with a blank expression. Coo! A strange noise was suddenly heard. Li Yi lowered his head to look at her, then walked back to the food station. When he came out again, he was holding a small bowl of egg-fried rice that was still steaming hot. As if she smelled the fragrance, the little girl turned her head and looked straight at Li Yi. For the first time, there was a glimmer of light in her bright eyes. Eat. This was the first time Li Yi saw an hungry princess. He squatted down and passed the bowl to her. The little girl instinctively dodged his action. Seeing that he didn't seem to have any ill intentions, she put the doll aside after a long time. She reached out to take the bowl and took small bites. Li Yi sat beside the little girl. The steward walked out and was about to say something when he was glared at by Li Yi. Just like that, one big and one small sat on the porch. One ate quietly while the other stared ahead in a daze. Hey, is my hot pot ready? A crisp voice pulled Li Yi back from his dazed state, and its Tsundra little face appeared in front of him. Hot pot. Li Yi was confused. What hot pot? The Lolita's face turned from red to green. The taste of the hot pot depended on the base. There was no Heideleo in this world. Fortunately, it was easy to make a homemade hot pot base and didn't require much effort. The palace was a palace after all. Tender green vegetables weren't rare here. The variety of dishes wasn't something the prince's residence could compare to. Shou Yang Princess followed Li Yi like a shadow, asking him questions from time to time. It looked like she wanted to secretly learn from him. It was very noisy outside. The arrogant Lolita did not come alone. The princes and princesses were all attracted by the hot pot she mentioned. After the morning class, they followed behind her and swarmed over. A large group of eunuchs and palace maids guarded them. It seemed that His Majesty the Emperor was quite energetic when he was young, Li Yi thought to himself. He glanced outside and could not help but frown. At the door, a few princes and princesses surrounded the little girl and pushed her. The little girl didn't resist and just stood there in a daze, letting them bully her. "Can you teach me how to make hot pot? That way, I can make delicious food for father and mother." Princess Shining dipped her chopsticks in the hot pot and tasted it. She nodded in satisfaction and looked at Li Yi. Li Yi pointed outside and said, "If you can stop them from bullying Yongning, I'll teach you." Princess Shining was stunned for a moment. She didn't even hesitate and walked out with large strides. Among the group of princes and princesses, the proud Lolita was obviously the big sister. After a while, she came back from outside. Li Yi glanced at them and saw that the group had already dispersed. The little girl, who was a little demented, was led out by two palace maids. "Is that little girl really a princess?" Li Yi asked while he was busy cooking. "Yes." Princess Shining immediately replied. Between princesses, one couldn't be compared. Shining and Yongning were different by a word. One was the Emingzu in the palm of the old emperor, while the other could only be bullied by many princes and princesses. Thinking of the little girl's behavior just now, Li Yi asked again, "Does she not know how to speak?" "No." Princess Shining shook her head and said, "Yongning used to know how to speak, but she fell seriously ill a year ago. The imperial doctors almost couldn't save her. I don't know what happened later, but she recovered. Since then, I haven't seen her speak much. Yongning's mother passed away early. She never played with us. My brothers and sisters don't like her." Princess Shining was very willing to talk to people who were willing to cook for her. "You don't like her either?" Li Yi put the onion and ginger slices into the pot and asked casually. The proud Lolita was silent for a while and said, "Father said that a family should help each other. Yongning is also my sister. It's not that I don't like her, but she never talks to me. I can't do anything about it." Li Yi looked at Princess Shining with slight surprise. A 10-year-old girl could say something like this. It meant that the old emperor had educated her well. Although this little girl was a little proud, she wasn't bad at heart. It wasn't easy for a princess to grow up in the palace. The imperial court of the Li family continued the glory of the former Tang dynasty. The princesses of that era were extravagant and lascivious. They bullied the kind-hearted, raised handsome men, and even caused chaos in the palace. Even revolts were not uncommon. Perhaps the imperial family of the Jing kingdom had learned their lesson and paid attention to the quality education of the imperial family's children. The arrogant little Lolita was even more so, a pure white lotus that had emerged from the mud. She was born into the royal family, so it was normal not to be arrogant. Li Yi's curiosity about Princess Yongning ended there. She lost her mother at a young age and suffered from a serious illness. It was normal for her to be autistic in a place like the palace where there wasn't much human touch. Li Yi had a friend with autism in his previous life. When he was in elementary school, she was a weak girl who never communicated with others. She just sat in her seat and stared blankly. As her desk mate, it took Li Yi half a semester to walk into her heart and become her only friend. She was his first friend of the opposite sex. Although she was transferred to another school by her parents in the second semester, Li Yi had a deep impression of her. That little girl who ate egg-fried rice without saying a word with a wooden expression easily evoked some of the precious memories buried deep in his heart. The beginning of spring had passed, and the weather was getting warmer. However, it was still a little chilly. Eating hot pot in such weather was a good choice. Hot pot was a very magical thing. In the future, not only was it popular in China, but it was also very popular in Japan, Europe, and America. From ancient to modern, Chinese to foreign, as long as one ate it once, it was not easy to get rid of it. It was very obvious that eating this would cause one to become addicted. The princes and princesses huddled around the stove and made a big fuss. Even though they were scalded, they still kept stuffing the food into their mouths. The officials of the Foodstuff Bureau looked at each other in dismay. When had the food from the Foodstuff Bureau been so loved by these ancestors? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.